Hello everyone, welcome to the stream. I hope you can hear me loud and clearly and that technically everything works. Nice to see all people here. And today I have also some fantastic guests. But before we start, of course, a few words to this format here. I plan to do like a live stream with some of the Tolkien creators every week. I call it for now the, Rings of Power Roundtable. I know, a very creative name, but maybe when we find out what the table that Durin has is called, and maybe we change it also, I don't know. Or maybe we keep the name. But yeah, I have today three fantastic guests. I'm very happy that they agreed to join me. And if possible, we will, of course, repeat this next week as well for then episode 3. Today we discuss episode 1 and 2. And it's not a recap. We just talk a bit about the highlights of what we liked, or predictions for what might to come, some other details, pretty basic stuff, basically. I hope people find this interesting. And yeah, let's start with my guests. First of all, we have the fantastic Fellowship of Fan, Harry. Nice to have you here.
Hello, Chris. Hello. Thanks for having me on your fantastic channel too. Really appreciate it. Excited to discuss today.
And then we have, of course, also the fantastic Geekzone. I'm very happy to have you here. We talked about that we wanted to stream together, like have you as a guest here or me at your channel for a long time. Never worked out, but today you are here. Much welcome, Geekzone.
Yeah. Hey, Chris. Cheers, man. And it's great to finally do it.
And not least but last, we also have the fantastic voice of Geekdom, Dan here. Welcome. You're already a few times guest here on the channel. You're always welcome. Always nice to chat with you. And yeah, welcome, voice of Geekdom, Dan.
Hi, Chris. Thanks for inviting me on. And it's lovely to be here with these other gentlemen as well. I'm looking forward to talking about the TV show.
Yeah, pretty awesome. So I would say maybe we start off with basically get our standpoint. Now we had some time to create, at least some of us, some content, think a lot about the show, and so basically what are our impressions so far of the show? Just very short, and then we might go through every arc with the details we want to talk about, and maybe come to a conclusion then later in the stream. So I don't know. Who wants to start?
Yeah, sure. I'll go ahead, Chris. So to be honest, in terms of, let's say, my first impression, I was expecting, I'd say, a bit worse, but I honestly enjoy it more than the Hobbit movies. So let's say for the first 20 minutes when I was watching the first episode, I kept saying, okay, this is different from the books, and I was noticing I was judging it a bit harshly. So like, just to give an example, the whole Undying Lands with Gil-galad giving permission for Galadriel to go there. When I heard that, I was like, that's a bit dumb. But then, like, as the episode went on, I realized if I wasn't familiar with the books, the story, it flows. And especially like from the end of the first episode and the second one, that's, I was convinced, not convinced, at least I was much more positive. I was like, hey, things are looking quite cool, interesting, and I was enjoying it way more than I enjoyed The Hobbit. So it is a bit less than The Lord of the Rings, definitely, but so I'm quite optimistic, to be honest.
Okay, I don't know, who wants to be next? Harry, maybe?
Sure. For thoughts, I think, of course, we're on a Tolkien YouTube channel. I think there's the two main, I think, segments is from a law standard, and then of course as a television standard. And I think from a television level, it is, I think the best way to say it is that it didn't underperform to the $1 billion price tag. I think visually it looks amazing, and I think it did. I think even though the first episode was a bit slow, it did gradually build up by episode 2, and I think on that if you want to look at it from that standard, then I do think it was pretty good. It was pretty good. I think Geekzone just mentioned it by comparing it to the Hobbit movies, and I think even thematically, I think you get more of a sense and aura of Middle Earth in this show compared to the Hobbit to some degree. Because, for example, when we're in Rivendell, when we're going, across the Misty Mountains, etc., and I think with some of the CGI, etc., and how it's so bright and in your face. But here it is, even though it is still quite bright, it is more well done as well. But I think from a lore standpoint, and I think Geeks already mentioned one. I think the Galadriel sailing west and whether or not Gil-galad is now giving commands on who to go west. And I think around that it is still, I think, because 2 episodes in, it we still have a long way to go. But I think the best way to see, I don't think they have passed the line as of yet, like a too big of a line. Like where them down the road, who is Sauron, who, like, for example, where's Celeborn, etc. Once those get, if those are more egregious, then we'll have to wait and see. But I think it is still in a level where I can feel like this is in Middle Earth. But of course, the stories they are telling aren't technically from the book. So I think that one is more of a roundabout answer, but overall, it does feel like it can be Middle Earth, but of course there are some decisions, I think, firstly around the sailing west, which I think we can talk about later on and how that works out. But yeah, overall, it's satisfactory is how I'd put it.
Okay. And Dan?
Yeah, so I largely agree with the both of you. It does look very, very good in terms of like the visuals. Everybody's kind of been agreeing with that, I think. Well, not everybody. I mean, some people are criticizing
Yeah.
aspects of it and nitpicking everything, but
CW.
Excellion in chat, for example, says he doesn't think it looked $1 billion, but we come to that.
Well, I mean, I think they could have filmed and made this for less than $1 billion, actually. To be fair, that is a lot of money for a TV show, like any TV show. In terms of like placing it next to the Hobbit movies and the Lord of the Rings movies, I would agree in terms of like my impression of how much I like it so far. That it's miles better than the crap that we got in the last Hobbit movie. But it's nowhere near touching the cinematic masterpieces of the Lord of the Rings trilogy.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I'd agree with that impression. But I think it's also important to recognize and remember that this is a television show and not a movie. And so my primary excitement about this is the fact that it is a television show and that we're allowed to take our time with things and at times slow the pace and take in the scenery a little more. So yeah, my impressions of it overall have been middling. Like there are aspects, like you've mentioned about Gil-galad. I didn't really like that moment either with him sending Galadriel away. It seemed out of character for the character that I imagine him to be from the books. And so, yeah, there are little nitpicks that I have about the lore as well. And of course, there are storylines that they've entirely made up, which we don't know where they're going yet, so it's hard to judge. So there's little reservations, and I released a video earlier today talking about some of this as well. But yeah, I'm primarily enjoying it, but with some caution and some skepticism, I'd say.
Awesome. So yeah, I think we are very our views are quite similar in that regard. So yeah, I also just posted my little review thing on my channel and tried to get through everything to quite some time. Yeah, it's really I don't know. It's a two-edged sword. On one side, I also would agree the show looks really good. Like visually, it's stunning for the most part. There are some inconsistencies here and there for sure, but overall, I found it impressive. A lot of stuff seems to be practical that they did. So just from a filmmaking perspective, I definitely see what's going on. I'm also a huge fan of the cinematography so far, like beautiful shots that they have, like really well filmed. I have to say the actor performance is also pretty good across the board. There was no actor where I said, okay, that he doesn't work at all, or I don't know, he doesn't know how to act, or I don't know. It definitely these aspects worked out. And as Dan just said, there are of course a few things you mentioned Gil-galad, that I guess all agree almost that we imagined him a bit different, how he would behave, especially the detail with sending Galadriel west. Also Galadriel itself, I think the whole Galadriel setup is really, really strange, and I didn't like it too much. But I think why also my perspective of the show then at the end, like when I would just watch the Galadriel part from my perspective, I would have rated it much, much lower when it comes to how I liked it. But while covering the trailer stuff and so on, we had, for example, the Hobbits, the Half-Hoods there, and I thought, okay, I probably won't like that aspect. And then I see it in the first 2 episodes, and I'm positively surprised that the world building seems solid, though of course it is kind of a leap lore-wise here and there, but still we know Half-Hoods or Hobbits or their ancestors were around also in the Second Age, and with some cool ideas I got out of interviews, I definitely felt, okay, yeah, that somebody put in some thought here and there, and it might work, even though I'm not sure what they are going to do with the stranger. We will probably also discuss him in a moment, but from that perspective, I was very surprised by that. I was also skeptical about Elrond, and I was completely convinced by his performance in the show. So there are these, if you have low expectations and then people surprise you, I think your mood overall goes a bit up, and that definitely happened for me, so that I also, from my standpoint, would say, okay, at least I see the potential in the show. I also see, of course, when we talk about lore and the books and what's in it, the flaws of it, the let's call it liberties that they take, which are quite a few here and there. But I feel also, just looking into the books a bit, that you definitely notice that in many cases it feels a bit like a right issue. Like they can't, for example, call the capital of Eregion, it seems to me, Ost-Inedil, because the name is not appearing in the appendices on Lord of the Rings. It's only mentioned in the Silmarillion. As a result, it can't be named. Somebody told me recently that in what's it called, Lord of the Rings Online, it has the same issue. They can't call it Ost-Inedil because of that. So you see, basically they hint at it. You see it in the show, but they can't name it. And I assume it must be really, really difficult for showrunners to make a show, and then you can't name it, and you can't really put stuff down there. Like it seems difficult if you are so limited. Especially in the prologue, you notice a lot of detail that they couldn't cover, which they only vaguely hint at. And I, of course, would have laughed if they could have went into much more detail and show us this beautiful world. But just from the rights, it's not possible. So with this in mind, I can definitely understand some decisions, but definitely not all of them. And of course, also the Arondir part, I also liked more than I anticipated. So very curious what they might do with that. From this point on, I would say, because I just already started talking a bit about Galadriel, that we might go a bit into, like, we discuss arc by arc a little bit, because I think with the Galadriel part there might be a lot to discuss. I would include the prologue into the Galadriel part as well, because I think Dan said he definitely wanted to talk about that, or it was Geekzone, I forgot who had said it. But I don't know. What are your thoughts on this particular part? Maybe, I don't know, if you have a scene or so we want to see, let me know. I can try to bring it up on screen.
Mm-hmm. Starting with the prologue, right, Chris?
Yeah, let's start
Awesome.
with the prologue briefly. Just thoughts, highlights, lowlights, that kind of thing.
To be honest, when it comes to the prologue, something I found quite surprising is, from the writing stuff, it wasn't the greatest way to, let's say, a kind of soft landing with hardcore Tolkien fans. Like, for me, I was really surprised to see the elven children bully Galadriel. Like, it was like, really, that doesn't seem like it wouldn't be what I expected from the elves living in the Undying Lands, so it was odd, like a really odd choice. If they just had, let's say, her boat and it sunk for some reason, trying to give the same message, I'd have been down with that. I just found it like a really odd choice from, let's say, a writing point of view. For the rest of the prologue, I found the shot from like the War of Rat was really, really cool. You see the eagles and the dragons fighting. That was like fabulous. It's like top quality budget stuff. I guess again, it's kind of in line with Galadriel's story, and I actually didn't really realize it, and you just mentioned it, Chris. Since they don't have the rights to the Silmarillion and some of the other books, could they actually cover Galadriel's normal story, if you know what I mean? Because if they went with her actual storyline, they're kind of infringing on the rights, no? So in that regard, if they're talking about her, they had to invent stuff, I imagine. Like, I'm not sure what you think about it.
Yeah, I think you are definitely right. That some elements are not there. If we just go by Lord of the Rings, for example, like usually when we go by the Silmarillion, we would say that Galadriel is in Eregion in the Second Age, for example, and she leaves in Beleriand very early in the First Age, and as a result, you would expect her there, but in the Lord of the Rings, she is not really mentioned in context with Eregion. The only source that is somewhat canon that mentions it there is like a little text snippet from The Road Goes Ever On, but I don't think there they have the rights either for. So yeah, you are right that the classical Galadriel story is not really much mentioned of that in the in the Lord of the Rings itself. Like you really have to construct like a lot of details to make this work.
Yeah, because like even like similarly with her brother Finrod, if they had him, dying in Sauron's dungeon, it's they couldn't show it. So I guess fans would be mad definitely that things aren't canon, but at the same time, they either would have completely not shown anything or they'd be forced to change it. So in that regard, I'd give them the benefit of the doubt. Like I don't really mind. What I find a bit jarring is that for me, the Second Age, the main focus is this. It's a storyline of men, and so far, the first 2 episodes, the main focus points have been elves, and that's for me, it was an odd choice. I felt a bigger focus on men, on their interactions with Sauron. Having them at least lead one of the storylines would have been, for me, a bit more accurate, I suppose, towards my expectations.
Yeah.
Can I interject there?
Sure.
I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. It's always nice to disagree. Because they have largely focused on the elves, but I mean there are 2 main storylines I think in the Second Age for me, and that is Numenor and the creation of the Rings of Power, and the latter I think is very much an elvish story.
True.
For me. And then the 2 converge in the Last Alliance, and that's the third big storyline.
Yeah. To be more accurate, then I'd say it's the start of the fading of the elves, and when men start gaining more prominence. So a bit more of a balance, I suppose. But that's a good point. That the Rings of Power are definitely a much more elven story, completely elven.
Yeah, that is true. What is interesting, I think, about this is I definitely know what you mean with Second Age is more a story of men, because the creation of the rings is a very big story, but the material describing it, I think, is very split up. Like, we have a lot of detail about it in the Unfinished Tales, but in the Silmarillion, it's very vaguely described. If you compare this to, for example, the downfall of Numenor, and so I definitely know what you mean.
Yeah, I think in regards to the prologue, that's like from my end, guys. So I'm not sure. Yeah, Dan and Harry, if you want to add anything, or of course.
I mean, with the prologue specifically, the scene with the other elvish kids bullying Galadriel, I felt as though there was 2 things going on there for me. They were nodding at the fact that elves weren't infallible, and that there is a marring of ardor, and that elves aren't perfect beings, despite the fact that they live in a perfect land, in a paradise. That there is still the makings of strife there for evil to capitalize on, as we know it does in the Silmarillion story, which they don't have the rights to tell. And then, of course, there's the visual of the kids destroying the boats, which I think is a nod to the kinslaying. So, as far as not being able to tell that story on screen, I thought it was kind of clever that they were able to kind of have that Easter egg in there without actually saying it.
Yeah.
But with that said, like, it was an awkward scene. I didn't like Finrod's dialogue. The kind of moralizing question that he poses to Galadriel, and the thing about do you know why a rock sinks and a boat doesn't, or whatever it was. I was like, what are you even talking about? And it only made sense, like, in retrospect, to set it up for the flashback that she has when she's on the boat, which doesn't make sense, because why did she go on the boat if she was going to just jump off and swim for thousands of miles? Yeah, it wasn't a great scene, but I didn't mind the bullying or the thing with the boat as a metaphor. I guess is my thoughts on that.
For me, with the first scene, I think I understand the idea around the bullying and how that's a theme for Galadriel in the later episode, but I think the execution wasn't, not how I would have imagined going forward with it. But I think with the prologue, I think again we saw, I think they showed Tyrion burnt to the ground and destroyed, and I think they made it seem like one massive battle happened there. Then all the elves came over, and I think those hints we know with the scene when they're holding up the swords. You can have the same people saying, "Oh, maybe it's the Oath of Feanor," and it could very well have been. But then you also have Finrod there. You're like, hmm. But then the idea is that they're trying to merge it together because for a television show, I think Finrod is one of the main characters for this first part of the show. So, this first 10 minutes. So it's a little law violation, but I think in the end it serves the purpose of the television and narrative story they're trying to tell. So, and I think one of the nice things about it visually, I think I really like the way they handled Morgoth, because I think this is a debate that if you're ever going to have a Silmarillion show, whether or not how do you show the Valar, the godlike beings, they're eternal, and it's showing if you show a physical form on screen, would it take away that magic and aura from it? So I think doing it as a shadow, I think they achieved that still. So I really did like that. So I think all in all, I think we did have that nice shot of Sauron, and I think it was an adequate telling of the first stage for someone who probably doesn't know a lot. Of course, for us when watching it, the first stage wasn't just one massive battle and just overdone with. Go over to Middle Earth, quick 1, 2, then Sauron's and Finrod's dead. Well, not Sauron, I mean Finrod's dead. I think, of course, there's more nuance to it, but I think in that aspect, they somewhat achieved it, despite the fact that still that first scene still could have been. I get the idea, but I think the execution could have been a bit better.
Yeah, it's definitely a good point. They go. As Dan said, some of the stuff they do is definitely quite clever. Like I really like the point that you made with the boat. Like that's a really good point. That they might portray the kinslaying of Alqualonde there with it, or play with it. I didn't even come up with that idea, seeing it, but now that you mention it, it seems pretty clear that they that this is what they were going for, basically.
Yeah, I'm not the first person to point that out, but yeah. I think they were thinking about that with that metaphor.
Definitely. And I feel like there's another scene. I probably won't find it here fast enough because it's just a tiny frame here. There's the red-haired elven kid. Now, first, of course, it doesn't fit lore-wise perfectly, but he has how many red-haired elves do we know? I found him. Maedhros, of course, comes to mind. Of course, he would be older than Finrod, else it doesn't make sense in the chronology, but still, they maybe portray him, and Galadriel says in the background that not everything is evil from the beginning. Like, also like a little nod there in the right direction, I think. And I find this very many little ideas that they really try to I don't know, squeeze everything out of the Lord of the Rings and just put in some references that are not only vaguely named or in this context. It's kind of clever, but I agree that, for example, this metaphor with Finrod is, of course, I don't know. I also didn't like it. I like it too much in this context. And as you said, it only makes sense when you see basically the very end of the first episode, where Galadriel makes her decision and jumps into the water. And from this perspective, it feels like very artificial. Like, it makes sense in the end, but I didn't find it very elegant. Like, okay, this only is said and explained and whispered, and you don't hear what he whispers to her because for the final scene. Like, it feels very constructed as a result, and I feel a bit that is a little problem of the prologue.
Maybe that scene with Finrod teaching her about the boat and the stone. Maybe like Galadriel was flunking physics in elf school, and he was just trying to teach her about like surface area versus weight and buoyancy.
Yeah, that's definitely a possibility.
I don't know. I'm being absurd, but
we get the
yeah,
point.
Yeah.
What is do you feel like when it comes to Galadriel, what I noticed, I think I also said this in my my review, that it feels a bit like you see the end, like Galadriel grabs this one kid and tries to smack some sense into him, and I feel like from there the character Galadriel pauses and the time moves on, and then she's grown up, but she's still kind of child Galadriel in the show, if that makes sense. Like, it feels like this is the basic outline, the basic foundation of her character, what we see in these early prologue scenes, and then from there they set her up as an adult, maybe a bit advanced, and then just want to develop her further from there, which they did, in my opinion, a terrible job in the complete Galadriel arc, if that makes sense. Would you agree?
To be honest, again, Chris, it didn't really bother me. Like, I didn't expect something to be in the middle of the transition. I do agree in terms of, like, Galadriel, she looks the part, even the acting is good, but I just don't feel that it's the character. It's I'm not too happy. I'm not happy with the storyline, but I wouldn't have expected like a transition scene in between, like her growing up or something. I was okay with it.
Any other thoughts?
From my end or from Dan and Harry?
No, from Dan
okay.
and Harry.
Is the question around Galadriel's story arc?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Is it? If so, thing from what I can tell, they were trying to find a way to get her to Numenor, and then if they've gone for this way, and it opens a whole can of worms. I think.
Yeah.
Of course, how it works out, but they feel like it's the best option. I think maybe sending on a much more easy diplomatic mission could have, we do know in Numenor there were elves coming to and from the island. So I think until quite late in the reign, I think past the 20th king probably, and I think manufacturing it this way, it does leave one to question. For example, her leaving the boat and how that instinctive reaction should then. I think the caveat to that is that it's part of her character, the fact that she's still not developed yet. She still doesn't have the wisdom that she has in the third age, and I think being able to make that instinctive decision where she could easily probably die, but still fight off Finrod, not fight to fight and avenge Finrod, that moment. But I still think, again, the execution could have been a bit better. And I think even with the wise not being that wise, I think after spending a number of years with Melly and the Maya, I do think jumping off a boat quite far out, wouldn't be the most wisest of decisions. But maybe what I feel like actually is with Galadriel, what they're doing, they're taking the end of the first age bit. I think they're pushing it to the second age to try and build that character up. So in that retrospect, it's quite interesting how they are dealing with that. So I think, I can understand the theme and the idea of, she's just being reactionary. She's driven. She's not at the place where she is right now, where she would not have made that decision. But again, I think it comes more down to execution. So that's my belief in the Galadriel arc in that regards. In episode 3, we're going to see where that takes her.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. I think definitely that episode 3 will be also a turning point. Is maybe a bit too dramatic, but I think definitely a very important to see. Like they spend, as you said, the whole setup. It doesn't really like. It's not ideal. Let's put it that way. It's all exists just to get Galadriel to Numenor in the end, and she makes this very long journey, but character wise and development wise, she achieves very little in this time due to the almost absurdity of her journey that she has to make through.
Also, why not send Elrond instead? Because of the family lineage there. If that is meant to be at the end of the statue up there, he's looking at his lineage, his history. I thought that could have been maybe sort of having Galadriel. I think lore-wise, it would be much more interesting to see, the island that his, brother built up. Basically, I think that could have been a really nice touch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, Chris,
go for it, Carl. No, go.
Just to add something to that, Harry mentioned that they kind of took Galadriel's, let's say, character arc from the first stage and they moved it to the second. This is kind of the one for the elves in general. Like the impression I had was they made them too similar to men. Like I get that there are bad elves, you had Feanor and all of that, and they did have bad characteristics, but for the most part, elves were typically quite virtuous, quite noble, quite good natured, and like when you had Galadriel when they were traveling in the snow, and she wasn't going to leave one of her partners behind, but for a moment she almost didn't acknowledge that he needed help and that they had to just keep pushing on. Or you had Gil-galad. Elrond was actually writing his speech, and even he almost seems as if he's rather proud, the noble figure of Gil-galad. I just didn't feel it. It was almost that elven virtue is almost managed at this point, and that kind of bothered me. It's
no, I understand that, and I think, for example, I think when we were in Tirhadal, I think some of those elves, I think the one played by Augustus Pugh especially, did not seem like that's when you really see the humanized elves. I think that scene in particular where Ronde is leaving, I don't think that I wouldn't associate that really with an elf, but I think from a showrunner standpoint, I think what the nail they're trying to hit is that I think you're right in regards to them not feeling maybe fully elven. I think Gil-galad to some degree does, but I think maybe they're looking for this payoff whereby you see, I think in a television show there's a character arc, and I think maybe we're going to see her get to that point. Then maybe the payoff of after seeing her having being a bit insolent now, but then seeing it grow over time. I think for a television standpoint, for maybe more general audiences, that is the preferred way. But I do agree with you though that at a point you would not. I think even I said you spend half a cent however long with Millie in the Maya, and I think you act like that still. And I think if they have to go even further back into the first stage if you want to take that aspect of a character arc, when she it is debated about when she takes the decision to come over to Beleriand, and after the Feanor speech and Tyrion, etc. So I think having these motives to have her be driven was really, really back then. She's always had the dream of ruling a kingdom in Middle Earth herself, and I think they're trying to mash it too. And I think hopefully by later on, we've seen that maybe that progression from maybe where she was before the kinslaying towards then how she is at the end of the second age, but we're just seeing it in season 1, season 5 of this show, and I think that is my hope. And then if so, I would more understand. But if they don't, then I do certainly agree with you how they've taken almost the soul away.
Yeah. To be honest, like Elrond and Celebrimbor, I thought they were like nailed perfectly. I love the characters. Again, just the elves, it almost feels like, let's say, a mixture between The Witcher and Lord of the Rings. Like there's that human nature is amplified a lot in them, and I wish I'm down with the variation. You can show a couple that are let's say have that human I wouldn't say evil instinct, let's say bad characteristics, but we haven't really seen that real good side of the elves apart from Elrond, and I wish we had a bit more focus on that, I suppose, for like a distinction between the races, to get a better feel of them.
I hear what you're saying there, but elves do also vary, and they do have personality and humor and all that stuff too. I mean, the aspect that's very unhuman about them is the fact that they're immortal. But I mean, think about that one elf in The Hobbit that gets drunk and passes out, and that helps them escape in Thranduil's halls, right? I mean, in the Peter Jackson movies, we had the scene with the drinking contest, and Legolas seemed to be immune to alcohol, which is very much not in line with the drunk hobbit in the drunk elf in The Hobbit. I know that's a very specific and kind of niche example of elvendom, but but elves do have humor, and they have a silly side, they have a dark side, and I think this show is doing a decent job of exploring different aspects. But as far as Galadriel goes, I do think that she is a bit one note at the moment, and I'd like to see that develop over time. As Harry was saying, I'd like to see her character grow and change. So I see it both ways.
I agree with you, Dan, on like the emotions and like that part of the series. I think they did a good job at. Even like when we see Elrond's interactions with the dwarfs, they're very warm. I don't want, let's say, a cold elf, who's wise and kind of withdrawn. But I do feel, again, that distinction between men and elves, that there are bad aspects of elves, but typically they're a lot more good-natured. While so far, it's a bit more gray, if you know what I mean. I'm not saying I want it, totally perfect, let's say the classic example of an elf, but maybe that they tone down the bad side a bit more. These petty agreements, which you're more likely to see in selfish men rather than in elves who have lived, for thousands of years, who have acquired a ton of wisdom by then. And that's like, I think that's probably that like kind of wisdom, yeah.
That's maybe fair. I would say, as well as a caveat to that, the Sylvan elves at Tir Harad, we don't know how old they are, so they're not characters from the books, and we've not been told. So we don't know how old Arondir and his friend are, how wise they are, but they're Sylvan elves in the far reaches of, like east of Mordor somewhere. So they're not high elves, so we don't have any reason to think that they would be the wisest of the wise,
Yeah, definitely.
And I think, in accordance to Arondir, I think he did mention that he has been there for 79 years. He has patrolled there, so I think that does seem maybe lend to the fact that he's still quite a young elf as well. And I think that is almost in union with the fact that with his love thing, whatever's happening there with Bronwyn as well. So I understand Dan's point that some of them might be a bit young, but I still think Augustus proves portrayal of an elf is not, I don't think, what I would have in mind for any.
What I thought about the Arondir is that he felt, I feel like, more elven than some other characters, but I'm not sure if you would agree on that, because I don't know, when he's introduced, we see him here currently on this screenshot. He gets close to this, I call it a tavern, and there's his chess player, and he basically runs past him and says, checkmate in 3 moves or something, and then he already hears what the people talk inside, even though he's not inside yet. So he has a keen eye, what Tolkien basically saying. He observes his surroundings quite well and looks into people. He also, doesn't, like, when this kid, I think Rowan is his name, tries to make trouble, and the tavern keeper tries to hit him, he just stops his fist in front of his face. So basically, he seems like very in control. He gives his trait of being like superior to normal human beings, if that makes sense. And I don't know, he's also relatively calm. He's not overly angry or emotional. Like he has a certain style, maybe a bit reminiscent of Legolas in here and there, but You know what I mean? And for me, he felt more elven than some other characters that should maybe felt more elven, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I agree, Chris. Like, to be honest, I think in terms of his characterization, it's an accurate depiction of a Sylvan elf. So they nailed him, for what you'd expect from such an elf.
Yeah. What is also interesting, of course, is that they also mention in the show that when it comes to the relationship, that it only happened ever 2 times. I found that also kind of interesting. So I think the writers would definitely want to portray, that is a very rare thing. We are aware of that. Like this little, let's call it excuse. So with the Princess of Dol Amroth, you could of course make an argument it happened more often than 2 times, 3 times then, but I don't know.
Third Age though. That's later.
Yeah, that's true. You're right. It's much later. Okay, forget what I just said. Yeah. But they definitely notice that people might see this, let's say, problematic. And do you think it's a statement to soothe our expectations of the people who know the books quite well?
Yeah, it could be, to be honest. Like, it's a way of showing like both an Easter egg and saying that they know it's not something which happens often. So it's a way to strike a fair balance between pushing forward the storyline of a potential elf-human romance and still, let's say, showing the more hardcore or more passionate Tolkien fans that you're trying to stay true to the storyline or to the lore of the world, I suppose.
Yeah, I definitely. What is kind of interesting, like, I don't know. Now we start skipping basically through these storylines. Shall we? I think a moment ago you said, Harry, I think you said it. If we would come back to our beloved Galadriel, that she was basically why did they not send Elrond to Numenor and then send I don't know, Galadriel, for example, to Eregion and do stuff like that. I find that is an interesting detail because I also recently did like a small video about Galadriel. Like I started, will be a longer video when will be several parts, and I did quite a bit of research into this character. And what I realized covering her like again a bit more was definitely how much trouble Tolkien had placing her somewhere. Like she's really a character that Tolkien struggled placing. That's why so many versions of her exist, especially in the Second Age. And Tolkien really tried to place her. I think, for example, it's a good example that she leaves Beleriand relatively early. I think Tolkien writes before the fall of Nargothrond. And then I assume he did this to not include her into more stories. So he basically said, okay, Galadriel is wise and she wanders off already. And but I don't really, behind the scenes, I don't really want to write her in all the wars and all the in the kinslaying and I don't know, the War of Wrath and so on. And so she leaves Beleriand early and is out of the way, if you want. And Gil-galad is also a character that struggled quite a bit, especially finding a place when it comes to his parents and so on. And in a way, due to some characters growing naturally with basically the lore, like Elrond, who's much older than the Hobbit as the character from a writing point perspective. I think, first mentioned 1926 in the writings, and Galadriel was invented in 1941. So there's a huge difference in this regard. And I assume that it kind of reflects what we see in the show in that regard, that also maybe the showrunners had trouble placing her somewhere, finding a good place for Galadriel, because in the books, in Lord of the Rings, it's not mentioned that, like, only in the second edition, I think it was added that Celebrimbor is the Lord of Eregion, and what Galadriel did is not really clear in that book. You really need the material, I think, from Unfinished Tales to really get the Eregion Galadriel story going. And even there, she's just like, just imagine we would go for the Eregion story. You would have also to invent quite a bit, because so far I assume, I'm not even sure if we will see Anatar or Sauron in the first, like as a major figure in the show in the first season. I'm not even sure if that might be the case. Let's pretend it happens next season or so. Then also I think Galadriel's story arc basically also starts when Sauron becomes a thing in the world and tries to establish contact with the elves. And so you can't put she has very little to do in the first season. Of course, you could put Galadriel then to Khazad-dûm, and I don't know, but it still would feel... just imagine the rock smashing contest would have been between Durin and Galadriel. It's like, sure, it is possible, but I think it felt more natural in context of Elrond, who, due to him being able to read, for example, the moon runes and so on in Hobbit, like Tolkien pretends that he has some knowledge, or gives him some knowledge about the dwarves kind of way, and he had contact or has contact later. So he's also a very good fit, in my opinion, to just lore-wise and story-wise to put him into the story of the dwarves, but he can't be in Khazad-dûm and in Numenor at the same time. So I kind of, from this perspective, I kind of understand that they said, okay, what are we going to do with Galadriel? Well, Thranduil is east of the mountains, and in Lothlorien, technically there's Amros. She can't be there. She only gets there, according to Lord of the Rings, I don't know, when Amros dies, 1900, I don't know, 81, I think. And that is Third Age, and that is not even close to Second Age. So what are we going to do with this character in the meantime? She can't. I mean, she could stay in Lindon, but that would also be a bit boring. I feel like there are not that many possibilities what you can do with Galadriel, especially in context of the right situation. So, from my perspective, it makes sense sending her to Numenor, and I fully agree with Harry here. I think you also said that why not just send her on a diplomatic mission to Numenor? And I ask exact the same question also in my video. Yeah, why not? If you want to have this... Oh, sorry.
Sorry to interrupt. I was thinking a
No
nice
problem.
way that could have a way to do it was, I think it's 871 of the Second Age, that the letter from Gilgalad to Tarminaldo, and we
Yeah.
see that the worrying, and maybe to still stick with the Lord to some degree, but then also put your own interpretation on it. You could have maybe Galadriel technically be that letter, and that would have been. I know it seems quite. Of course, you have to work around with it a bit by telling them about the evil's back. Then you still have that concept of that happening. So I thought, that was another real interesting. But sorry for interrupting. Continue, Chris.
Oh yeah, no problem. That's a really good point. I really like that idea. Yeah, you could, for example, send her there to deliver the letter. I don't know. We know it's different in the books, but it would be smart to integrate Galadriel into the storytelling. And then if you really want to have this shipwreck story in between, because you have this massive water tank you want to film in, let the boat be attacked by, I don't know, the sea monster and get sunk, and then let Herr Halbrand a stowaway, or I don't know, a sailor or so on the boat, and then they have to make their way together on this thing to Numenor. I think you could have done the same kind of, if that makes sense, without just going so off limits, if that makes sense. Not sure. I know. Now I've talked a very long time, and sorry for that. Not sure if you have something to add. Definitely would be interested in your opinion, Carl and Dan.
No, I agree with you, Chris. Like, probably the best way would have been not actually the best way. If you're gonna include Galadriel's storyline and you want to make her a prominent character, the storyline of Numenor is, I guess, the ideal way to involve her. What Harry mentioned of using her as a messenger, that's would have been a fantastic idea. Though you'd have, I guess, the time skips, which they're trying to avoid, since they want to try and compress time as much as possible. So you'll have to have her not really in the flashback, you know what I mean, like a segment in between of her visiting Numenor, and then you cut away to some 100 years later to try and, I guess, show the passage of time, that the king died, that the dynamics are changing. You have our Farazon in charge now, and all of that. So I guess maybe that's why they avoided it. And perhaps like the way they're trying to show her character, she's more she's hell-bent on finding Sauron. There's more aggressive. She's not really again, the way they're portraying her, they're moving away from that diplomat mission. She actually gets annoyed at Elrond because she calls him a politician. So perhaps since they're kind of painting her to be headstrong on chasing Sauron, if all of a sudden she's being used as a diplomat, it's like a massive character shift. So with that storyline, then that might have been a bit conflicting, I suppose, and not that believable.
Yeah, that's a very good point, I guess. Especially if you set her or want to set her up like that. Like, I also imagine that they really want to have a very strong contrast to the Galadriel we know from the Third Age. And just, I think Harry also mentioned this, like, I don't know, half an hour ago or something, that she has then a very strong development over the seasons and gets closer and closer to the Galadriel we know. Of course, also very curious to see this transformation. I'm not sure if Dan wants something to add.
Yeah, I do. I like the idea as well that Harry had about the letter to Tar Menelder. You could even potentially lift some of the prose from that letter and like kind of remix it and put it into Galadriel's dialogue if you could get away with that legally.
Yeah.
I like that idea a lot. And it would have the net effect of having having Gil-galad be a little closer to book Gil-galad and feel a little nobler and a little less political, because you could have him earnestly send her there instead of kind of manufacture this conflict between these two characters, which is I feel what they've ultimately done. I wouldn't, in terms of the story that they are telling and what they've done, I wouldn't underestimate the potential story implication of Halbrand's place in all of this. I think they're setting something up with him, and I think there's a reason why she meets him the way that she does. People have been speculating that he might be related to the royal line of the people in the east, the Southlands. I guess you could call it kind of Khand kind of area, or Harad. I'm not really sure what you'd call that area at that point in the history, but there's that kind of icon on his that he's wearing around his neck on that necklace. That
talisman,
this talisman that the camera kind of lingered on for a second or two, and that we saw Galadriel notice. And then the guy in the tavern in the Southlands who Theo's mate, who I can't remember his name. Somebody said it earlier. Rowan, that's it. That guy, worst actor in this show so far. By the way,
yes,
for me.
I agree.
He mentioned something about the king is coming back or something. There was a line about one day the king will come back and will be out from under your pointy boots or something was the line. And so that's kind of exposition for something going on with that civilization that we don't entirely know about yet. We know that they have some ties to Morgoth. That was kind of teased as well.
With the Horden village was the specific one, which also Halbrand I think is from, because he's adrift.
Yeah, it seems so.
Yeah, I think so too.
And I think
so. I think they're setting something up with him, and I think that's where we're going with that storyline. And so there's a reason why Galadriel's storyline led to that point with the shipwreck. I just don't really like how we got there.
Yeah.
But go ahead, Harry.
I was just going to say there's a little extra thing. The thing that is on the same type, that art type thing, sculptured. We saw quite a lot of that at the village on some of the side pieces, on some of the walls. I think it's a nice little Easter egg as well. So there is a link between Horde and the other villages and Halbrand.
Yeah, for sure. I could even imagine. Sorry, Carl, go on.
Sorry, no, just me.
Yeah, I could even imagine that maybe Halbrand is the father of Theo, because Rowan also says that he is that his father ran off or something, and I don't know. It seems like there's a father.
And to add to that, Bronwyn said that she had many family and friends from Horden village, so that could link the two. And another thing is that on Halbrand, so with Chris, if you want to pull up, if possible, if you could please pull up that shot of, we got the symbol and the necklace thing Halbrand is wearing. It's also like on a pouch type thing, and some people have been speculating maybe that was one of Bronwyn's, because she does potions, stuff like that. She was doing dust. Maybe that could be related. That could be one of hers. So there are some nice little maybe potential links to Halbrand being potentially Theo's father, which would be quite interesting. But another thing I would say about Theo is that we haven't seen his ears at all yet. I think he has a perfectly lovely shaped bowl haircut. And by the way, I like to say also this is speculation. I know this. I'm not spoiling anything because this is my sort of speculation. But we haven't seen his ears yet, and it's covered by his bowl haircut. So maybe they're a bit pointy, and that'll be a nice, interesting plot line. Maybe the show might follow.
But
No,
then would he dislike elves if he has pointy ears? Like, he'd notice it, no? Unless it's
Maybe,
like some self-hate or something. I don't know. Like
yeah,
maybe hates
maybe.
but then maybe
Maybe
he'd hate his dad more. I don't know.
Maybe that could be, or he's angry. There's some resentment between him and his mum. Maybe she's, because his mum does have a thing for elves, or maybe because, well, of course, Bronwyn is a human. Maybe that means that because other ones enough, it won't be as noticeable, but it's still kind of noticeable to the point where in Tirharad it is quite extreme. I made hating the elves, so just to be precautionary, even though it isn't too pointy. But and that's getting quite specific. But I think there is a way to work around it. But yeah, I think back to the main point, Chris. You're talking about Halbrand and Bronwyn links and Theo.
Yeah, definitely. Maybe we could also slowly switch in this direction. I tried to find the statue thing you mentioned. It's a tiny frame. It's for me currently hard to find the thing, I think. But yeah, in the Southland there are also these I have found it finally. It was tough.
There we go.
Yeah, this thing you mean. Yeah, exactly. I also put it in my thing. Like if you look at the talisman, it really looks like I don't know, like a bird, and maybe some figure with a crown is sitting on it, almost like the Witch King on his winged steed. And here we also see like this potential bird with like a woman or something, or a person in his beak.
Funny thing is, actually, someone sent to me. I don't think Amazon really care. One of these, but it's like a wooden one from Tirharad village. And I think there are a few. I think this is quite an interesting thing. It was like, I think I got a picture of it. I don't want to put it on stream because I think copyright strike, because it's copyright for Amazon. I can send it in the Discord. It's basically what seems to be a Balrog fighting. Then you see it looks like Finrod being killed at the bottom. So there's lots of iconography here. I'll try find it while you continue.
Okay, interesting.
Just to add something to this image, Chris, which is kind of interesting. So as far as I know, there was some promotional material for the series, which involved like a guy with his hand over his sword, and the sword is clearly, like with a horse pommel, and it was confirmed to be Halbrand.
Yeah.
So and like in this like statue, or not statue, this rock at the bottom right, there's like the horse image with the spear. So I'm not sure if maybe it might be something Rohirric. Again, I'd be surprised how they can connect it, but that horse iconography is so clearly normally associated with Rohan that I wonder if they'll go down that path, or what they can do with it, honestly, what they can do with it, like in a different way.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I also noticed this rider very interesting. We see him later. We could definitely make some parallels. I think in general they for like two characters, I think they set up like a lot of possibilities, especially for the people who know the lore well. Like one is a stranger who could be, I don't know, whatever potential Maiar you're thinking of, and also for Halbrand, who also you feel like something is wrong with him. Like when you see him on that boat, probably won't find the scene. Like when Galadriel appears, everyone on the boat is almost going crazy and is really, I don't know, at the brink of madness. And he's just sitting there and doesn't care. Like he feels really, in a very deliberate way, but in a good way, kind of, as he would not belong there. If there's more about him than you might think. So in from that perspective, I think it's an interesting character because it gives you something to think about. Okay, this Halbrand guy, something is wrong with him. Maybe is he Sauron in disguise? Is he, I don't know, later will he become, I don't know, one of the Nazgul? Is he this king that is mentioned in this village? And you can, like, there are a lot of subtle details in the show that you can try to connect. I always like finding stuff like this out. There's also one of the trailer you've seen behind prison bars, which is also gives you instantly the idea, okay, Sauron was also prison in Numenor. Is this a reference? And so on. It's just
just to add, Chris. Again, like, of the whole Rohirric thing, it's it's way before the time of it. So
yeah,
I just found it odd that they chose to use that design, because then, like, again, if you look at this rock, technically that's an eagle. I imagine that's what they're trying to depict. So
yeah.
Again, I just have no idea where they can go with it. I'm pretty sure it doesn't make sense to make him a man of. No, that doesn't make sense. It would make absolutely no sense to make him a man of Rohan because of timeline issues and all of that. It just feels so odd that they chose that imagery.
What I find an interesting thought I had when it comes to this is maybe because these people, like, this is in Tir Harad, this place here. If you look at the map, it will be now very difficult to find the frame for it. But just it's basically in Mordor. It seems it's south of Kiris Ungol, kind of, and so and we know that, for example, Mount Doom was originally created by the first Dark Lord Morgoth, and so it kind of makes sense that there were maybe some people some followers of Morgoth there, and these people are maybe the descendants of those. And from this perspective, if you're a follower of Morgoth, then the eagle is not like this nice friend that Gandalf that helps out Gandalf get anywhere, but it's the enemy. It's like basically a dragon. Like it's maybe this imagery we see is like completely perverted from the perspective of, oh no, the eagles come, they eat our children and women, and we have to kill them. And this is basically the ideas Morgoth fed into these people originally, and as a result, these ruins was what at the time of Morgoth once stood there, and they had this imagery, and maybe this probably, wait a minute, maybe I find it, the Halbrand talisman, maybe I find it instantly. No. It's so hard to find this scene. But you
if you want.
But the Halbrand image basically is in this context. Oh, I found it. Lucky me. If you look at it, it's probably really hard to see. I said it's maybe also, we know that, for example, the fell beasts of the Nazgul also in the book are described as having beaks, so they're a bit different compared to how Peter Jackson depicted them on his team.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe he's on a fell beast. Maybe he's like the true king is also like some follower of Morgoth. Maybe, I don't know, being somewhat reminiscent of the idea of the Witch King, who is now their true king and who will free them from the suppression of the, I don't know, eagles and other good forces. You could definitely see that they are going for that.
And Chris, if you go to your general and topics on your Discord server, here's another one that I think you guys will have quite fun. It's in similar. I think we will at some point see it. I don't put it on screen. I think this is a good way. If you want to go see quickly, it's on Chris's Discord. But the first for games. But this is another one of those tablets. These
Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry. I just kicked out myself.
so good.
Can you hear me again? Okay, we had some short technical issues. The problem is when I try to get to the text terrible things happen, and my complete overlay is messed up. So I think.
Do you want me to say in chat? We'll be back in a second.
Yeah, we should be good again. So now my image is on the wrong side. Whatever, I'll fix it in a moment. But
okay.
Yes, I just interrupted you rudely when you said you put it on the Discord.
So I'm saying, do you want me to repeat what I said, or should we go straight into it?
Yeah, repeat, please.
Yeah. So I was saying in your Discord right now, in the general, here's another one of the Tirharad things, sculptures things that are in the village at some point. Saying don't put it on screen, but if people want to go to your Discord, to join it and check it out, then you can. I think again, there's lots of these like this one is less more about about Halbrand, but more that the Tirharad people have made these things and their interpretation on the battle.
That's
I
very
can see
interesting.
a Balrog, which looks like it might have a wing or two, which is quite interesting. But I think the reason I want to show this, and you can see in the bottom right, you can see maybe that is Finrod trying to Sauron, but it is interesting. But I think overall, it shows that these Southlanders are really quite. They're not forgetting people. I think that's the important thing with the links with Morgoth and having this is their interpretation of the Battle of the First in the first stage. So yeah.
Very interesting, yeah. Looking at it. Pretty cool. But yeah, sadly I can't put it on screen, just for safety's sake.
Yeah. But if they want to join your Discord, then they can go and do it.
Exclamation mark Discord in chat if you want to have the invitation link. Yeah, that's really interesting. I have to admit, these are the details where definitely the budget of the show and so on shows quite a bit. I feel because you have somebody had to create all of this. It's like always impressive to me how much work some people must have put into all of this. It's really interesting from that perspective. I think like it's just so much stuff, and these depictions somebody had to make them. I find this really fascinating always to see how far they went with certain elements like these. In the meantime, I try to fix the Discord problem, the overlay problem. Are you still there?
Yeah. Out of curiosity, Dan, how would you feel about of Theo? Because I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, man.
On Theo?
On Theo, yeah, and the character of Halbrand, if there's any link,
I think it's a possibility, yeah. Theo seems to have a darkness in him. He seems to hate the elves. He lost his temper mindlessly at some mice underneath the floorboards, and it turned out to be a lot more than mice. But the way that he did that, it seems that he's got some problems. And so there's definitely some resentment in him. And it seemed to be implied that his father is not dead, which sets up a mystery.
Yeah.
And so, it's a possibility that I've considered that Halbrand might be his father. Who knows?
It's so funny. Whenever I think of that, I just think of Ian Blackburn's acting in that scene. It is really, really out there is how I would say it. But I think with Theo, it's his actor in an interview said he's not happy and not really. He is quite angry at the start of the show, and by the end of this season, that feeling won't really change. So I do think it is setting it up on a dark horse for that. But Geeks, I'd like to hear your thoughts as well on that.
Yeah, to be honest, what I'm wondering about like Theo and the link to his dad is he kind of has, let's say, a Morgul blade. It's not exactly that stored in the basement which he's hiding or under the floorboards. First of all, I'd wonder if that belongs to his dad, and if it's showing that his father was a servant of Sauron, that he might have been summoned by him, and that might link him to Halbrand. That Halbrand is on a personal mission as an envoy of Sauron, perhaps to introduce some form of corruption among the Númenóreans.
Yeah, and one thing I noticed, which is quite, and I do agree, I think one thing I noticed, which I quite liked, I'm not sure, Chris, if you're able to get up in time, but the scene where, we see the farm, before the kids enter the farm, you go back a bit, and when they're just showing the wide shot of the farm with the background, interestingly, this farm is really, really in close proximity to a massive looking mountain in the background. So I think maybe that's another little on the nose thing that, this Sword of Sauron is quite close to
Oh,
a really massive mountain volcano looking thing. It'd be really interesting if you do if you are able to get the shot up, because I think it's a really nice little hint again, I think almost Easter egg, being so close to Orodruin maybe as well.
oh, you don't
So
see it.
And
Now
the
I see it.
orcs are digging tunnels as well, so it
yes.
seems as though they're kind of like laying the foundations to create the Black
Mhm.
Land of Mordor.
Yes. Yeah.
It seems like that's the way we're going to me.
Mhm.
And I like it because it kind of parallels the storyline of Celebrimbor building the forges that will build the rings. Meanwhile, the orcs are busy, and Adar presumably, and he's taking orders from somebody.
Yeah.
They're all kind of building the foundations of the forges that will forge the One Ring at the
Mhm.
same time. So it's kind of like parallel storylines, which TV writers like to do a lot.
Almost poetic, I think, is how
Yeah.
you would do it. And I think another thing that I'd quite I think they could be built into, which I quite like. So we're seeing the tunnels right now underground, and if this is in close proximity to Mount Doom, I think then maybe at some point, soon enough, they're in the tunnels because of the sunlight. They cannot, they cannot stay out the ground. That's why they have, if you didn't see when the orc attacks Bronwyn and Theo, he has this sort of wooden pallet thing in front of him because he doesn't want, because of the sunlight. And I think maybe once the true king has returned, maybe, or Sauron comes back, and then we'll see from what be the ash and mist that raises from Mount Doom, then it will physically see the land cover into Mordor, and then once they won't have to have these tunnels anymore, because from the mountain, it will cover the sky. I think so, kind of like we saw in the Return of the King. So I think that would be a nice thing that maybe they are building to.
Yeah, true. That'd be really cool, man. I didn't think of it. It's like
Mhm.
Yeah.
I assumed the tunnels were like some sneaky way, to kidnap
Yeah.
people, but I
It's-
totally ignored the whole light thing, so it makes
Yeah.
sense.
Mhm.
That's the same reason why they're covering their like heads in those weird kind
Yeah.
of helmets that they're
Mhm.
all wearing as well, which I did
Mhm.
pick up on that. So yeah, I think you're right. But they're also
Yeah.
kidnapping
Agree.
a labor force,
Yeah.
seemingly.
Yeah.
They're abducting villagers, and we've seen the kind of slave camp in the trailers, and so it seems as though they are kidnapping a labor force of slave labor to build something. You would assume.
Yep, and I don't want this to sound like I am trying to find a caveat with slave labor, but it's really hard to work this point around. But I think maybe not all of the humans going to wherever they got taken to went so forcibly, maybe due to the amount of hatred towards the elves, etc., and how it's building up. Maybe some of them voluntarily went as well, which is why at the village you see no bloodshed, you see no blood, you see no loss. Like maybe a lot probably were captured and taken, but I also wouldn't be surprised if some of the human villagers, went there voluntarily as well. That'd be an interesting thing to see if that does actually play out. Because it would only just add to, hatred and the evil by the Southlanders and the elves, Sylvan elves having to look over them.
hmm Do they kind of seem to be a bit in denial of their past now and their links to Morgoth? Like when they mention
Yeah.
it to Bronwyn, exactly. Yeah, when Arondir tells Bronwyn about their past history with Morgoth, she's kind of in denial and surprised. She says they're my family, they're my friends. So I've gotten the impression that in terms of their evil history, it's almost forgotten. They're like they almost feel they're mistreated by the elves just because the elves are bad in their eyes rather than because of their past deeds, their heritage.
Yeah, and I even think that build if they're gonna kind of, I think there was a line here. I think actually no, Chris is a wizard. He's already got that scene up. I think where they're having that little conversation of I think it even happened. Aronde had it with Revion, whatever his name is, the elf on the watch ward, and that are these people still? It's kind of like a little nature versus nurture psychological question. Are these people in the past now, is it gone, this hatred, or is it still brewing there? Is it still there to this day? I think That's the discussion happening there, which also seems to be a fundamental block in their relationship as well, it seems like. And I think Geekzone, you raise a good point of how this will affect, how they're going to build up. Maybe some Southlanders will stay to fight. I think even in one of the promo clips, it talks about, Aronde reassuring Theo, because Theo says half of them are gone. Then Aronde says half of them still stay. So I do think that, this whole dilemma around the past with Morgoth links will also maybe divide Teherad.
Yeah, that's a good point. I could imagine that you might be right that in a way, I don't know, the people in the village don't like the elves don't like the people in the village, and Arondir is kind of, and Bronwyn are kind of in between, if you want. An interesting setup for the story, and of course, it is just from the foundation, how it's set up, can only lead to a divide inside. Very curious how they will play with this and so on. I mean, there are so many interesting details about Sauron in the Second Age, when you, of course, look into material they don't have access to, but yeah, very, very curious what they are going to do with that in the show. Like, this could be a very interesting place. I'm not if we look at the map, let me just see where Mr. Map is. In case people wonder where Tir Harad is, I don't know, kind of round about here. What is interesting about that, in my opinion, is that, I would have preferred if they put it closer to the Sea of Nurnen in that regard. But you could make an argument that if they're closer to Mount Doom, that you definitely are able to portray maybe this conflict more closely to how this place might change and what divide might come to these people when suddenly the orcs become more active and so on. Like,
Yeah. And I think one nice thing in the transformation is that it seems like the ground, the earth, the water is being poisoned in some way as well in Teherad, because that cow, it was squirting out black poison, whatever. So we are slowly seeing the setup of Mordor here. I think that's a nice little hint to that. And so yeah, that's what I think.
Yeah, and they had said that the cow had gone grazing to the east. So I
Mhm.
suppose if they made it near the Sea of Nurnen,
Yeah.
you'd kind of lose the direct eastern link to Mount Doom and like the main source of Sauron's power. So it's like
Yeah.
maybe their way of showing he's establishing a stronghold, and all of that in those
Yeah.
lands.
Mm-hmm. And you would have thought that being closer to the sea would be more habitable. I think even in the Third Age, it was still habitable to a really short degree. So it's interesting with the location of these villages within, I guess, Mordor. But yeah, that's the scene of the Black Blood, which is I think it was a quite nice little hint in how to see evil returning. But I think going to episode 3, we're going to get we're going to go
Mhm.
further and let's just explore further of it.
Can I ask a question of all of you? So, did you guys catch the implication that the Sylvan Elves at the Tir Harad Watchtower answer to Gil-galad? Because
Yes.
they were recalled by the High King, it was said.
Yeah.
What did you guys think of that and the implications for that? Because it's not clear to me that there are distinct cultures of elves, and they don't seem to be kind of explaining that there are different tribes of elves and that they don't all answer to the High King. The name Noldor hasn't been mentioned once yet. So, what did you guys think of that?
I have like the same thoughts as you, Dan. Honestly, there's that distinction isn't there yet, and I'm curious how they can link it because the Sylvan and Noldor, they don't really answer to each other. It would be odd for them to make it one faction. Perhaps it's like a way to show why, let's say, these elven sentinels in the south, they seemed a bit begrudged about their position there. One like Arondir wasn't a farmer in the past, and maybe they kind of owe it to the Noldor and the answer to them, but they're disgruntled about it, about their duty, which is why they don't really treat the humans that well, I suppose. So maybe they'll try and formulate it in that way.
Mhm.
Yes.
Well,
Oh, sorry.
No, that's what I was going to mention. I think us four were talking about it before the stream, but in the last 6 minutes, the Queen has officially passed away as well. So I think we were talking about it before, and that happened during the live stream. But sorry, continue.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
saw that it popped up
Yeah.
on my phone. I wasn't
Yeah.
gonna interject with it, but yeah, rip.
That is wow. I mean, we could just to pay our respect, have a moment of silence for that. If you don't mind, just want to be respectful here. If you don't
Yeah, of
mind.
course.
Well, that was very unfortunate event now during the stream. Thank you for the moment of silence here. Just really just want to pay here respect. Also, I know I have a lot of viewers from the United Kingdom and around, and I think all you guys here are also connected to that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep, born and raised Englishman.
Yeah.
Same.
Most
Was
of
me
the world
as-
has a link to it, to be fair, Chris.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
to be fair, that
That's
is
very
true.
broad.
That is true. But very unfortunate event. I would still continue if you don't mind. That is of course really like the timing is of course very unfortunate, but it's we can only pay respect and be respectful about it. For me, always, like as a German, it felt very distant to me always, even though fascinating in a way to have like a monarchy. Even though it's quite modified, I guess, these days, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Well, I think should we get back on track?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, we can.
Just out of
Yeah.
curiosity, guys, before I'm not sure if we're gonna move to another character. Because there was something I remembered which kind of bothered me about the elves, and again why I felt they kind of harmed or removed the virtuous part. And I'm more curious about like your interpretation of it. So at the point when they're in Linden, I think there's some sort of meeting, and Elrond wasn't allowed to join because he wasn't exactly an elven lord. When they said that, did you think they were referring to some sort of position, or it was because of his half-elven heritage?
Yeah, I wondered whether it was the half elven thing because of the look on his face.
Mm-hmm.
I have a few thoughts on this. It's either the half elven thing, or it's a matter of seniority because he's one of the youngest elf. Well, he probably is the youngest elf, apart from maybe the Sylvans that we've met in the show.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Or it's because he doesn't rule a realm of his own in his own right. Although if it's the third option, that would leave very few potential characters in the lore for that to refer to. So yeah, I'm not quite sure. The least egregious option is the third, but it makes the least sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I thought it was because he's half elven, because he does look a bit almost annoyed that they still see him that way. And again, like from a lore point of view, he's technically, he chose an elven life. He should be fully acknowledged as one, and that kind of bothered me in the way it's like the elven structure. They kind of see him as not really a lesser elf, but there's that sort of disrespect, I suppose. I don't know. It had bothered me if that were the case.
Yeah, I would agree on that. I also just think because he has not his realm to rule over, basically his little place like Rivendell later, that he's not considered an elven lord. But you could be right. Could have to do with him just being half elven or so. Interesting thought.
I think it's bad writing for them to not make that clear. Actually.
Yeah.
One way or another. I mean, you could argue it's bad lore based on what the justification for that line was, but it was just a confusing throwaway line. So
Yeah, that is true. I guess we will learn more in the upcoming seasons. Maybe it's just like some kind of tease for this to be further explored later.
Mhm.
People in the chat are talking about Círdan, and I'm really, missing his influence in some of the politics a little bit because, he's sort of noticeable in his absence in a way as a Tolkien lore fan and somebody who knows, the background of the culture that exists in that corner of the map. It seems sort of kind of, as a glaring omission in terms of the Lindon political scene, given his connection to Gil-galad and to Elrond as well.
Yeah, but I think Amazon confirmed that he's in season 2 now, so we get some, a little bit of relief that he is going to be here at some point. But it would have been nice to see maybe a scene with him and Galadriel before she went west, or you have him involved. I think an interesting thing is when they said no lords only, with the lords only to Elrond at the start. Maybe that's in reference to that. Maybe Círdan was at that and a few of the others, but he was Celebrimbor would probably be there, but he wasn't allowed there because that's just a television way of saying, he's going to be in season 2, not season 1. So that's just maybe like an interesting nod to him there.
Yeah, that's a very good point. It could be the case. I like that idea that it might have to do with him, but I agree also that let's just show him very shortly, give him a little cameo that okay, she's sailing to the west. Círdan has to be consulted or so. That I would have find very cool. Especially he is mentioned in Lord of the Rings, so you definitely have access to mentioning this awesome character. Would be it's a bit, but as you said, it seems he appears later. I assume same for Celeborn. Do you know if Celeborn will appear in season 1 still, or will he just, even though it's almost out of context, but or will he also appear in season 2 or later?
I think they've confirmed that Celeborn is showing up. I've heard through the grapevine, but I don't think we know any more than that. But Harry probably knows more than I do.
I think Patrick McKay told us to our faces that he is going to be. They have a plan for him and Celebrimbor, so that's, I think, a nice way to again be more rest assured around that part.
Yeah.
Robert told me that he asked them that. So
okay, that's really nice to know that we get those characters. And I mean, with Círdan, of course, also a Sindar living under Gil-galad and serving him. I'm not sure if there's any explicit mention, because we just talked about the Sylvan Elves being under being under King Gil-galad as well. I could imagine that maybe some Sylvan Elves also were with Gil-galad. I mean, it's not impossible. I think so. It's never really mentioned. We only know like a few we know that Sindar elves definitely lived in Lindon as well under King Gil-galad, but not sure if anybody of you remembers like a quote or something.
Yeah, I can't recall any, Chris.
Okay.
A quote about what? Sorry.
If there's a quote, you don't need to quote it by word, but that mentions if Sylvan elves were also living in Lindon. I only remember that there are Sindar elves in Lindon, but not really Sylvan elves. But in theory, it could be possible.
Yeah, it's not said that they're not, but it's never mentioned anywhere that I can think of.
Yeah, I mean, Sindar and Nandor always had a better relationship, so could assume that maybe in the service of some of the Sindar, even Círdan, that there were some Sylvan elves as well. It's at least distantly plausible, I feel. But we just. Is there any particular detail on the what's it called, the Tir Harat section, the Southland section, that you still want to discuss? Because we haven't even talked a single moment about the Harfoots, I feel. And there's also a lot of potential that we might discuss there, I feel.
I think, to be honest, we covered a ton of detail on it. I'm not sure what's left for us to talk about.
That is true.
To the extent there were things I hadn't noticed completely. I'd completely like not noticed. There was like the symbol, I hadn't gone into detail on it, and Harry had made like some awesome points, and like, or the orcs, the lights. So I learned a ton from this live stream of which I completely overlooked.
Yeah, that's always the case when you have like the different perspectives. Like then also mentioned something I haven't thought of with the boat and the first skin slaying. Found that also very the paper boat very interesting thing. I also thought very late about the idea. Wait, they use tunnels because they don't like sunlight. But I had this idea as well. I think I also mentioned the potential connection to the talisman to this stuff. So, but really like having these detailed discussions. You always learn something new. Always a lot of fun. So yeah, maybe we move on to the Harfoots because time is moving forward. We maybe have to. I guess we all liked the Elrond and the dwarf section quite a bit. I would assume I liked it. More of my highlight in the show. You as well too, I assume.
Yeah, I think it's the best part, and it was really cool to see elves and dwarfs getting along better, I suppose, and even the more caring nature of Elrond seeing Khazad-dûm at the peak of its glory. You could really feel it. Like, in my opinion, the dwarfs, the way they portrayed the dwarfs was the best, even more than Lord of the Rings. It's for me the perfect depiction. Like, if The Hobbit managed to capture these sort of dwarfs, it would have been a lot better. Because for me, that was one of the biggest weaknesses in The Hobbit, and one of the biggest strengths in the series. The dwarfs really feel, I wouldn't say distinct from other dwarfs in other fantasy, because dwarfs typically there isn't that too much variation, but you could get like a really good feel for them. I don't know. I was like always really intrigued or excited for their scenes.
Yeah. Otaku Senpai writes in chat. Any Sylvan elves living in Lindon would likely be remnant of the green elves of Beleriand, would they? Yeah, definitely a possibility, for sure. That some of them stayed there with them. Interesting idea.
I think in an interview, Aronde said in his early, sorry, I'm forgetting his name, Ishmael Cruz Cordova said in his character's early years, that he spent time in Beleriand, which is quite an interesting to add to the mix of his character. So yeah, another layer.
Yeah, maybe he is a green elf. That would make sense.
Yeah. So for people,
that's what I thought too.
That's my headcanon now until they contradict it.
For people wondering, like before in the First Age, there was like a west coast section east of Lindon called Beleriand, and there in Osiriand, like a section with a lot of rivers, there lived the green elves, and of course when the section later then in the Second Age was destroyed and sunk into the ocean, they had to go somewhere, and of course it makes sense that some of them then went to the next best thing, which would be Lindon as a result. So I can definitely see this. We know that some Nandor stayed around, for example, Lothlorien earlier on, or east of the Misty Mountains when they did the Great Journey and did not complete it at all. So yeah, that's definitely a possibility. Probably would have to read up on a few things here, but I definitely could imagine that this might be the case. But yeah, we were briefly talking about Elrond. I would say, because we have a lot of positive things to say about Elrond, that I wouldn't say we go fast through it, but I would still suggest we discuss the Harfoots first, and then the best saved for last, basically. If that makes sense. If you have nothing against that. So yeah, when it comes to the Harfoots, probably I should have looked out for a section. Still have here the cow with the goo here as image, which also, like, isn't this like a, what do you call it, oxymoron, like a stylistic device? Like if you say black milk, because milk you associate with white and here it's black. I think that's also like an interesting idea. Isn't that in some novel about probably World War II and the Holocaust or something, that there's also a mention of that? Forgot where I read this before, like the term black milk. But maybe somebody in chat knows. Even though, sorry for chat today, I've really a lot of, due to production reasons, I've a lot of trouble keeping an eye on chat all the time. But I tried to find the Harfoots. I don't know. Is there a particular part? Like, I could start with, when I saw the trailers, I said it at the beginning as well, I expected that I potentially won't like the Harfoot stuff. And then I saw it and really liked it, like surprisingly, by surprising amount. Had you similar thoughts, or did you, how did you feel about or what did you think about the Harfoot sections in the first 2 episodes?
Yeah, I liked them. The society had a kind of personality to it, which felt appropriately Hobbitish, but also different to the Hobbits that we know. And I felt like the characters that they introduced, they did a lot with very little, just, kind of small interactions and little bits and pieces to give you a sense of who these people are. And our two main Harfoots, Poppy and Nori, I felt as though they had a strong relationship and friendship and dynamic that could be quite interesting in the future. I just hope they don't all get massacred by the stranger at the moment. But yeah, I agree. I liked them a lot more than I was expecting to as well. I think the trailers did that whole plot line a disservice, frankly. But yeah, we'll see what the future holds.
Yeah, from my end, I was also skeptic, how they're going to introduce hobbits and I suppose use them for the series. But so far, I'd say I think they did a good job at them. Culturally, the way they depicted them, it's really, really cool. The only 2 complaints I would have is maybe the Hobbit scenes for like the first episode, they kind of slowed it down. Like when you consider it in the first 2 episodes, not much happened in terms of story progression, and I think we're 1/5 of the way in the series. And the Hobbit stuff, like they occupied quite a big chunk, and I felt maybe in terms of tempo, they kind of slowed down the series. And the second thing, which I'd say I'm somewhat apprehensive for the future, is like Nori's story arc, or her motive seem to be to explore the world to see more. If they're used to introduce the stranger, who we'll discuss later what he might be, if that's their, let's say, use in the storyline, introduce this guy and then maybe he'll be relevant to the rest of the story, I'll be okay with that. But if Nori becomes like a prominent part in the story, I can't see how they would do that without making it feel too forced that they're using a hobbit as a main character. Like, if they manage, like, that's great, to do it in a way which doesn't feel forced or out of place. But it's something I am a bit cautious towards.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. I also, I don't know, there are a lot of details. There was an interview, I often mention it, I mentioned in past streams as well, where they interviewed one of the showrunners, forgot which one that was, and the what was her name, of the woman that is a producer, executive, you know what I mean, executive producer. What was her name? Harry, do you know?
Lindsay Weber.
Yeah, Lindsay Weber, exactly. Thank you. There he basically they talked a bit about the Harfoot and said that the idea was that the big wheels of their wagons and carts is like it's deliberately reminiscent of the round doors of, for example, the like back end and the places in the Shire, like the buildings there. And I found that a very interesting like idea. Like, with details like these, you notice there is definitely some thought when it comes to world building that went into that. It's just a very cool idea. For example, I don't know, there are probably other folks that were nomads or so that also have like some culturally things. Like, I was invited by the German Tolkien Society, and like a week ago or so, and we also discussed this detail, and somebody said there that I think, forgot which culture it was, like Roma or Sinti or so, also kind of nomadic folk in Europe and so on and surroundings. And she said something, when they settled, like they were nomads back in the day and had no home, basically no home where they stayed. And now these days where they, or later days where they become, I don't know what the English word is, but stayed at one place, had a house or something, then they had like these wheels from wagons as a decoration in their room. So from that perspective, it kind of makes sense that later the hobbits have something that reflects their old culture. Also, like all the, I assume we call it proverbs that they use, they're always related to cards and to their kind of nomadic lifestyle. I really like that they put it. It feels like, from my perspective, even though it's all kind of invented, they at least put in some effort to create an interesting world, and so it works. And you also have these fantastic actors who have a really good chemistry, in my opinion, and it's just very joyful to watch them. Of course, it's true that not much really happens there, but it's kind of, I assume, also the idea behind them. Like when Nori talks to the stranger, she says something like, "Yeah, you fell from the sky. I also fell once from a tree, and then for a week I called, I don't know, some berries, pig berries or whatever." Forgot what she said exactly, but it's just such a small hobbit matter that she compares to somebody who is like a supernatural being falling from the sky in a meteor to her falling from a tree and just mixing up names for berries. It's just, I don't know, it's kind of cute and adorable in a way, and it gives the whole show, even though it takes out a lot of the pacing and the progress in the story a bit, it definitely gives like a little note to it that makes it, first of all, very relatable, because you automatically start to relate it to the Hobbit. There are some scenes where they move the stranger around in that cart that felt like it could be Merry and Pippin, basically. It's from Peter Jackson films, I should add. And it's, I don't know, I kind of like this. They play with it. You could maybe argue it's kind of a cheap trick to play a bit on this nostalgia we have for those characters, but for me at least, it kind of works. Like, as a result, I enjoyed the interaction a lot. What to think of the stranger? Like, I don't like the idea or the potential idea of the stranger from a lore perspective, but the concept, just if we extract this completely from Tolkien and Lord of the Rings, is still quite interesting, I feel, and at least I'm curious where they're going with the stranger, even though I don't necessarily like where they might going with it. But about the stranger, we probably discussed quite a bit.
Mm-hmm. But so you go first?
Well, I did want to build on something Chris said, so I wouldn't mind if I could. But all right, sure. So the one thing you said there in that long summary that you just gave there, Chris, was about the Harfoot kind of some of their stuff feeding into later Hobbit culture, and you mentioned proverbs, I think, at one point. Not sure if there's a language barrier issue, because I'm not sure what exactly you were implying when you talked about proverbs, but one thing I thought about with the Meteor Man storyline and with him falling to Earth the way that he does was the song that Frodo sings in the Prancing Pony in the books, right? This wasn't in the films, but the Hey Diddle Diddle song about the man in the moon, and so that was that's the nursery rhyme that Tolkien kind of like extrapolated this longer song from, and then he published it, I think, in the 1920s or something, and then it ended up in the Rings, and so I wonder, this is my kind of like theory about this, I wonder whether the Meteor Man storyline will end up becoming a part of like Hobbit folklore and will result in that song being created in the future, and that it will
I have
live
exactly the same theory.
Yeah. So I kind of like that idea, and if they did actually think of that too, then that's very thoughtful and very creative.
Funnily enough, J.D. Payne actually, in an interview, specifically mentioned the Man on the Moon and that story and how it links. So I do think, Dan, you are really on something there with that. I think even the showrunners are to some degree, because they did specifically mention the Man on the Moon. So that's a nice touch. I agree as well.
Yeah, definitely. With Proverbs, I think Poppy says to Nori when they find the Meteor Man, have your reels come off your cards, something like this. They always have like specific phrases and sayings that are related to their nomadic culture that they added into their language, which I kind of liked. That was a detail I felt like distantly Tolkien-esque, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I can see that too. Yeah, and another, but talking about, I think, the Half-Wits and Meteor Man, the Stranger. I think, yeah, Chris, you have the episode in front of you. Nice. I think as to who where he's from, when Galadriel is on the ship to Valinor, and then once the gateway, and I think they've done it so it's some physical barrier gateway. I'm not quite sure. If that's another lore thing. It'd be interesting when Farazon goes at some point if they have to pass some sort of barrier. I think that's another whole another can of worms, which this whole narrative in general did. But when it opens up, the moment it opens up, and then Galadriel sees it, that is when the meteor position starts to play. I think, of course, we can't play it for copyright reasons, but I think maybe that's a hint that the meteor the reason it came into Middle Earth is because once the gate opened, when Galadriel was going forward and the gate opened, the elves basically opened it up so Meteor Man could fly out, so he was being contained in there. So I think that might be a little hint or Easter egg as to where at least the stranger is from.
That's a pretty good idea. I have to admit, you're right. When this here opens, and in this scene with Galadriel, the meteor appears. You're right. It could definitely be connected. I often ask myself, what is causation and what is cause and what is effect. That is a bit like we have also in the Hobbit culture this book that seems to be prophetizing what happens next at times, and sometimes I feel like. I don't know if when for example Nori's father breaks his foot, did he break, like was the Meteor Man responsible for that with his powers that he can't control, or was it just like I don't know,
I've heard that
the other way? Was it the other way around, basically, that what was cause, what was effect? Like, was it prophetized and just it happened to align, or was the Meteor Man the cause for it?
Well, if you believe in the divine plan and you believe in predestination and providence, which Tolkien certainly seemed to and is reflected in all of his works, then maybe there's no difference between the two.
Yeah. And I think even in this show, I think they'll stick closely to that, because I think J.D. Payne, he's a Mormon, so I think I'm not sure too much about the different sections of Christianity, but I'm sure I think they're really probably play into that as well. So that could be what's also the theme behind this as well in the show.
Nori's whole speech to Poppy as well was about providence. It was about her being there at the right time and her she was meant to find the Meteor Man. Just as Bilbo was supposed to find the ring, she was supposed to find this random hobo in the middle of the woods who crashed to Earth. But who do we think he is? Because we should probably talk about that.
Yeah.
It's a really weird idea I had, because and again, I'd love if you guys after this video check it out, because it's almost a conspiracy theory from my end. But when Nori is speaking to him, she says, like, I'm Nori, to introduce herself, and then he points at himself and he says, kind of like, I Nor, like she thinks he's repeating her name. I don't know if I was just imagining it or if it actually sounds that way.
It's like, a pretty smart observation. It might be onto something.
I don't know. I was like, could it be because like I heard it once? Now I'm gonna keep imagining it. I don't know, but that's why, like, if you can after the video, check it out, because I'd really love to hear your thoughts. Like, if you think if there's like a link or not, because again, sorry.
I just want to say, just in case people wondering, Ainur is the let's call it species of the spirit beings of the angels, if you want, in Tolkien's world, and the supernatural beings that are so powerful, come in meteors and make trees bend, are usually most likely considered part of these Ainur beings. Just want to explain this.
Like, again, I would have imagined the way things were that they might try to make it as if he's a wizard come early, even though again timeline wise it's a bit weird. But I suppose it would fit in. Like in terms of characters, that's where I was going. That maybe it's Gandalf and it's his first interactions with hobbits, and why eventually down the line he might have a soft spot for them.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And if you think it's a blue wizard, I think there's a current theory going around with the multiple meteor theory, where I think this is still, maybe this could be again divine providence, but we saw 5 shots on the meteor, and maybe that links to 5 Astari. I don't buy into that, but that could be a possibility if you want, there's 2 blue wizards, but there's one here. Maybe there is another meteor that we saw, but we didn't see it land. So I'd be interested to see what you guys think of that theory that is currently circulating.
And it's also an interesting theory. Have not looked into that, but it could be. I feel like, I don't know. There are a lot of details about the Meteor Men, like quite a few details that can bring you to all kinds of conclusions. And I would say, from a lore fan perspective, it's kind of fun trying to reconstruct what the makers might have thought of. I feel like a lot of theories are quite plausible, but now that you mention it, if I've not counted the shots, but if it's really 5 shots of the meteor, it's not,
that is the true part. It is 5 shots. We see it on screen 5 before it lands.
That is really interesting, I have to admit. I would also not buy into it, to be honest, because Spielkalb is here, welcome. It's an interesting theory. I don't think it's the case, but of course I could be wrong, because then they had to introduce too many characters. Like, just imagine, like, we already have a lot of characters, and it will only add up. Just adding 5 supernatural beings to it is, in my opinion, a bit too much, especially 2 of them they don't have rights for. Though they could just show us 3 Meteor Men, and the other 2 are off in the east or so, and we don't never see them. But it's an interesting idea. I never not noticed that. What are your thoughts, Carl and Dan?
Well, it seems to me that you go, Carl. Go ahead.
Okay. Just in regards to what Harry is saying, though, wouldn't you think it's a bit odd if it's like assuming it is a wizard, and if it were Gandalf, if they only introduced Gandalf without having the other 4 wizards in some world, in some part in the world, like it would go. It's almost better, in my opinion, that they kind of implied that there were 5 meteors, representing representing these 5 wizards, and some of them don't show up in the story, rather than just saying, hey, look, this is Gandalf, and no one knows what's up with the other 4 wizards when they arrive, and all of that.
Somebody says 1 per season in chat. I find it funny.
It just feels like more lore friendly, again, assuming it is a wizard.
My thing around Gandalf is that I always thought a good final shot for the show, end of season 5, last episode, would be maybe Gandalf coming on a boat to Middle-earth. That'd be a really nice little, nice segue setup thing. So that is why I'm currently in the camp that I do hope that it is not Gandalf. And I think, again, everyone's saying it. The first Vanity Fair article, the first thing they say is it Gandalf? And they're like, no, but there are other people in the order. And every article's talking about it. Every, even average fan, someone who knows basically nothing about Tolkien, watching the show, is saying, is this Gandalf? Is this Gandalf? I just don't get, okay, if it does end up being Gandalf, okay, everybody knows is like, that's the effect. And I think from one thing we know about these showrunners, they like surprises. They like, mysteries. We've got Hellbrand, we've got what's happening with the Dar, etc. There's so many mysteries. I just don't think they'd want it to be so plain obvious, because once it is the reveal, okay, it is Gandalf, we're like, okay, fair enough, now let's move on. So I just think there is something bigger at work, there being that simple, and that's just my personal opinion. So I think I just don't really see it being that easy.
Yeah, and if you're paying close attention, it's not at all obvious. There is quite a bit of evidence for this character being a lot more sinister than an Istari, in my opinion. Some of it's kind of shallow evidence or circumstantial evidence, but you can definitely speculate either way. And in that sense, it's quite a well-crafted setup for a mystery.
Yeah.
I just hope the landing kind of lands.
Just like the meteor.
Yeah. I hope the payoff is going to work, both from a lore perspective and from a storytelling perspective. I laid out some of the evidence in my video from earlier today, and I encourage people to go and watch that if I may. But I'm leaning 60-40 towards this being Sauron, and perhaps they've invented a storyline for something that he was doing in outer space or something, and he was thrown to the ground. Because what would a wizard be doing up there in the sky, and why would he land in Middle Earth in that way? There has to be a reason.
But
It's
Dan,
very peculiar.
oh, sorry.
They have laid out that it's almost certainly a Maiar because of Poppy's whole speech about it's not a man because he would have been squished. It's not an elf because he doesn't have pointy ears and he's not handsome. That whole thing. So it has to be a Maiar. If you start to look at the evidence, you could point either way. And as Harry said, it seems like they're trying to lead the casual viewer into projecting that this is Gandalf with some of the evidence, but I don't see it. Blue Wizard is another one that people have been calling out to as well, but my question is, where's the other one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to add on to the thing they talk about, it might be being evil instead of it being Sauron. And this would be another theory. Maybe it's a Balrog. Maybe even it's the Balrog that maybe ends up somewhere in Khazad-dûm, which of course I wouldn't really want to happen because I'd like for it to already be there. Or it could be a separate Balrog, but that's another option. But again, it's human. How does he transform? But we saw when he landed and Nori held him, he raised all the rock boulders, rocks around in the fire, sword within him. So I think maybe that could be. I think he says mana uru as well. I think one of that means flame. So I think there are maybe casual hints to maybe it being a Balrog as well.
Yeah, I highlighted that in my video earlier. Mana, I took to mean blessed. I could be wrong.
It could either be blessed or the question what is. So it could be what is heat or
that's
flame,
what I said earlier.
or blessed heat. Or...
What is fire doesn't seem to make too much sense to me because he should understand that basic concept even if he doesn't remember his identity necessarily. Like, it seems to me that it would be a very strange thing for him to be asking somebody who he's struggling to communicate with in the first place. So I think he might be talking about the flame imperishable.
Yeah. Also
I don't know why he would be, but it doesn't particularly point one way or another. But it might point towards an explanation for what he was doing in outer space.
Yeah, exactly. So.
And the plot hook with the star constellation as well.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And also, sorry.
No, go on, Chris.
Okay. I also talked today with my moderator Kirdan, and he also said like, what is if he's like a fragment of Morgoth or something that he searched once for the flame imperishable. Now, maybe if this fragment fell back on Earth, not sure what they're going with this, of course, very spaced up, but it kind of aligns with what Dan just said. Yeah, exactly. So it could mean, like, what is flame? Because he seems to maybe seek a certain fire, or seeks heat because he seems to sometimes absorb it. Like, there are so many interesting little hints and clues and things to observe with him. Like, he must be clearly one of the Maiar, as or at least in some Ainur in some form, and there are not that many that he could be, like Tom Bombadil or so, if you would consider him an Ainu. I'm not difficult topic, but would not work. Why would he land there? He was also always there. It doesn't make sense. Like, the meteor implies he has to be kind of outside and come back inside the world of Arda, so that limits what the theory I liked most, and also then said it. I also had a very similar theory that he is the man in the moon, basically, and maybe this idea reflects on Telion, the Maya that basically escorts the moon, and what is flame? Maybe he's searching for the flame. He's searching for Arien, that is the other Maya who guides the sun, and the sun is a star. So you could maybe make some weird arguments with the star constellation stuff as well. Like I found that idea quite theory quite interesting. We have the men. You said it in the Hobbit. We have the moon jumped, the cow jumped over the moon. This song that Frodo sings and so on in the Prancing Pony. And then also in the Adventures of Tom Bombadil, there's also the poem about the man in the moon, which might even reference him. And this might be then the explanation of what we, as you said, then the explanation for how this Hobbit folklore comes to be. I find that definitely has a lot of potential, but there kind of also we know of a certain Maya that also likes disguises, like Sauron, and yeah, there are just so many details with, for example, when she falls into the meteor crater and she touches the heat, she says it's not hot. Like we also know when you put the ring into fire and put it out, then Gandalf also says it's quite cool. Like you could make also connection to Sauron in this beginning shot where they explore this frozen fortress. In the after the prologue, Galadriel and her companions, we can see that one of her companions touches the torch with his hand, and he says the fire does not give heat. So the basically seeing fire that does not burn anything or does not give out heat is also something that seems to be connected to evil. So we have the dying fireflies and so on. After, like, there's so many little details that also give him kind of a dark side, or something that links him almost to Sauron. The meteor shot from above that looks like the Eye of Sauron. Like, I feel like there's so many.
Also, like, a few notes of his theme are played in places as well.
Yeah, exactly.
In Meteor Man scenes.
That in addition, so there's so many details that fit perfectly.
Sorry.
No, you go. Just go on. Just want to finish.
Sure. I just wanted to give one more piece of evidence in the other direction, which is something that not a lot of people have pointed out, and you've been enjoying learning things this stream. So the little bit of the story, maybe you picked up on this too, but the little bit of the mention of Nori having found a baby eagle wounded and nursing it back to health, that kind of points towards Manwë a little. Like a little bit of kind of foreshadowing of what the direction that they could be going in. Something that not a lot of people have been pointing out.
And another little thing, I think, when I was on one of the shows yesterday with Gregory from Fellowship of Fans, he mentioned, in fact, that maybe a plot line we might see. I think, Chris, you were talking earlier about how, we were talking about, I think, divine providence and how Largo Brandyfoot, Nori's dad, breaks his ankle or gets it bruised. Maybe we see Meteor Man healing it, and that could be, a nice little link between there and continue the storyline.
Yeah, very true. I could also imagine to see something like this when observing him a little bit. The stranger, he sometimes feels like there's something dark, but also something light about him, almost like two different spirits trying to get control over this body, or I don't know. Of course, it doesn't make any sense just lore-wise. Like, just imagine there's Sauron in this body and Gandalf, and they're fighting each other for control, and whoever wins at the end, we don't know. But makes, of course, no sense. But just saying that there's so many aspects. I think they're just trying to trick us a little bit with how they make this. Like, for example, when he writes stuff on the on this branch, I probably won't find it. There's one rune, and it looks like a mirrored G rune, basically. So we also know Gandalf uses it, but it also is a bit off from this rune. I don't know. It's just so many little details that makes this character so fascinating in a way. Even though I think we all agree that the implications kind of worry us a bit, that the Istari coming to Middle-earth, let's put aside the two Blue Wizards and the last writings from Peoples of Middle-earth, but coming to, like, the Istari are a topic of the Third Age, not of the Second Age, but still, I have to admit just how they built it in is kind of well done, especially for people that know quite a bit. It really makes you think, what could this mean? There's another detail. I can't show it. Right, maybe I find the scene. Probably have to skip a moment, skip ahead. But there you see, for example, that the wizard is also kind of wounded, not really deep wound, but he has some bruises, I would say, or some wounds that aren't that deep. Like, if I would imagine like a Maya at full power, he would not have like wounds except for if he gets stabbed by very powerful ancient weapons or something. But you notice his face, for example, here you see some bruises. He really seems like he crashed, landed with a meteor. You see a bit of blood here and there, and this then again, if you read about the, let's call it the mission of the Istari, or how Tolkien describes the Istari, he writes, they have to be mighty peers of Sauron, and forgo might and clothe themselves in flesh. So, and then he also describes that they also come under the wearinesses of the world of being not an angel anymore, but a being. And also he describes that they can be confused and so on. So as a result, this kind of is fitting. Like, he just crash landed there, and he's still confused, having to sort out. He can bleed and so on, even though he might be under the hood a very powerful angelic being. And this again would hint at the Istari. I mean, if we now consider the Sauron theory again, then you could also make an argument for that by saying maybe Sauron had to take like a disguise that was and put a lot of effort into it. If we read Nature of Middle-earth, there is a chapter about Sauron's delay in Gil-galad. I forgot what the chapter name is. Maybe Dan knows out of his head. But there, it's basically described that Sauron had to take this disguise of Anatar and invest so much into it that he couldn't get control of some of the orcs in the east, and they would just mock him for this disguise. But he couldn't change it because he invested so much into this perfect disguise that it was not something he could just undo on the fly and get it back in a moment later. He really had to stay in disguise all the time, and also would wander through Middle-earth. We can read basically there. So nobody gets suspicious with what he's doing, and nobody could find out that he, in parallel, is also trying to grow his armies, and which delayed him then in the end, and also made him then to deliberate and strike too early, and then he got utterly destroyed later in the war against the elves. But you can, if you see it like this, you could maybe make an argument that the disguise of Sauron was also in a way similar to what the Istari took, and Tolkien even describes that he basically, I'm not for sure how he phrased it, but forebode, I think, the arrival of the Istari already with it. So he might have been very similar in this concept, and maybe he also just got this disguise, is now still confused, has to collect everything. Nothing is really evil from the beginning, you could say. He was also once a Maya of Aule, Myron, according to the Parma El de Lamberon, and that is just, there's so many possibilities, in my opinion, for interpreting this. It's, even though we know so much about the books, it's almost impossible to say who he is, and that's kind of not bad. I mean, the worst case scenario would be he's the Green Wizard, and he's just a totally made up character. That would be a bit of a letdown, to be honest. And as Harry, I think, pointed out, that he might be a Balrog is also an interesting idea, though what speaks against it, that I think a Balrog would not travel by meteor, so everybody sees where he is, because he wants to hide from the gaze of the Valar and so on. So I don't fully see that. Sorry for this long monologue, though.
No, to be honest, Chris, I really wouldn't be surprised if it's just an entirely new character. Because so far, like the way I see it, both for Sauron and the wizards, there are so many, let's say, lore-breaking reasons why, for for to be against it. Like again, like having the wizards arrive in the second age instead of the third age kind of defeats or detracts from a big part of their storyline of why they were sent. But at the same time, if he were Sauron, for me, I find it a bit confusing of why he's actually, he's in a very confused state. Is this, how could he be leading his armies at that same time? He seemed to be, from the impression I got, kind of, there's a buildup of strength. He's commanding the orcs, to serve his purpose. And him randomly landing over here in a confused state doesn't seem like the right mindset for it. And even, to be fair, as far as I know in the books, they say Sauron wasn't aware of the location of the Shire, right? Not the existence of hobbits. It's like, I'm not or was it I'm not sure if he knew about the existence of hobbits or not, but if this were the case, like, he would have met them in the past, you know what I mean? It kind of then affects also why the Nazgûl weren't sent out early on to get the ring from the Shire. Again, these are the Harfoots, they're wandering, so I guess it really, I don't know, I'm not sure if you're following.
For
It's
for
like,
sure.
Like, I wouldn't be surprised if it's just an entirely new character. Maybe I imagine there's like an Ainur aspect. He seems quite powerful, to have landed in such a way. But like, yeah, I'm kind of in that middle ground also.
Yeah, for sure. That's very interesting. Oh, sorry.
No, sorry, I'm saying I'm afraid I have to part ways now. So, but I'll say, Chris, thank you for having me on, and I'm excited. I think doing it next week as well, right?
Yeah, I think we will see each other soon, right?
Yeah, I think you'll be on our watch party show on Sunday. So excited to have you on there. So thanks to everyone who is watching. Nice to speak to you, Geekzone, and meet you again, Dan. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, likewise.
Yeah, very nice having you, Harry.
Yeah,
we will also wrap up soon, because I think we still have to discuss Elrond for a brief moment, I feel, but then we can also slowly wrap up.
So thank you. So I'll catch you guys next week.
Yeah.
Bye, man.
Awesome.
Yeah, talk to you soon, Harry. Bye.
Just one last thing though, Chris, on him potentially being Sauron, with the whole storyline of like Galadriel trying to find where Sauron is and like he can't be found. There seems to be something driven by his symbol. It's not just the mark of Sauron was here. Like, I believe in the first episode they say that the lore masters of Linden, they knew it as a symbol of Sauron, but they couldn't decipher what it means. So perhaps if it does turn out to be Sauron, like something happened to him, he was stuck somewhere, a battle or something of that sort, and now he's finally returning. Like maybe they'll use it in such a way.
It seemed to you guys when Gil-galad turns over the yellow leaf and it has the black corruption on it, did it seem to you that happened at the exact moment that the meteor came over his head, and that was not a coincidence?
Yeah. That's again the question: what was cause? What was effect? Like, was the meteor causing this Sorry, it was a German word. This leaf to corrupt, or was the blood already, like, I don't know, was there already some corruption that fell down as a foreshadowing, and then the meteor was sent because of this corruption to counteract it from Valinor? Like, you can always make this argument. It's very fascinating about this.
I'd have agreed with Dan though. Like, it's something I hadn't noticed. It's if that's the case, like, they seem to be, the implications seem to be quite strong towards that negative aspect of, let's say,
yeah, I agree.
I'd say it's more like than
Yeah, that for sure. I think that's one of the strongest evidences that something is foul with this meteor man. Like, definitely. Like, this thing, it really happens. Like, he sees a meteor, and I think then a few scenes later he sees the corrupted leaf. I probably won't find it. It is at the very end. Maybe I find it. We will take a moment. Yeah, I skipped it. I'm stupid. Almost. Yeah, it really is in the realm of the what's it called? The meteor thing. It's not directly the next scene, but it definitely seems to be connected to that, because we see Gil-galad also looking up into this to the sky and seeing this meteor. And then a moment later, he sees this leaf. There really seems to be evidence.
Mm-hmm. It could be again like Sauron's in some weird place or something, and now he's finally returned. Because like in the first episode, when Galadriel reaches his fortress in the north, as far as I know, she says that the orcs were conjuring some foul Morgul magic. So maybe they're like summoning Sauron back from somewhere. I don't know.
Yeah, possible.
She mentions the unseen realm or something.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
Which is kind of foreshadows what he'll do with the Rings of Power and the One Ring ultimately.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because that's what I'd be curious about if it does turn out to be Sauron. Like, where was he? What's up with the memory loss? And because in canon there would be nothing to kind of back that up. So I'd just be curious how they'd fit it in, or what sort of story they'll work with it.
Chris, you said you wanted to say something else about Elrond, because I have to go soon too as well. So
we definitely should maybe speak very shortly about Elrond, and then maybe shortly about what we expect from next episode, and then wrap it up. Probably you agree on. Like I said, always not on time. But Elrond, I found so far was definitely my favorite in the show. There's like a little detail that probably not that many people might have noticed. I'm not sure if I can find it here on the fly fast enough. It's in the scene like where they have this contest, and Elrond's axe breaks at some point. And what I found very interesting is he gets a new axe and then looks upon the axe, and on it something is written in Kirth. And if you read it, it reads iron in our hands. Right? Yeah, iron in our hands. Probably won't find the scene here because it's very short.
I noticed that too, but I didn't translate it yet, so this is interesting. Go on.
Yeah, exactly. And that is interesting because I definitely think Elrond lost this fight deliberately. Like, he probably could have gone longer. Maybe he even breaks the axe deliberately. I'm not sure, to catch a breath or something. But he does not want to break Durin. He wants to form him in a way. So he wants to mend his friendship with him again. It's definitely a theme for him, and that is why he just says, "Okay, I give up." And you see the relief. I really like that shot in the eyes or in the face of Durin then, because it also seemed like he was also at his limit and was not sure if he could have destroyed the next rock as well. And I feel like there's so many little details, and how the acting is great. The how it's the cinematography is really great here. Just so much fun seeing these scenes. You could say it's maybe kind of cheesy. Okay, finally I found it. It's quite interesting to see so many little details, and maybe I'm not sure if it was his plan to maybe, like, he seems hesitant for a moment. Maybe he really broke the axe deliberately and hit it with the, what you call it, the handle of the pickaxe, and hit the rock on it, so he could maybe catch a break for a moment, and then thought, okay, now the final swing, I feel like my opponent is also getting weaker. And then he read maybe this and got the idea, okay, maybe I should let him win, because winning here will not really help me. I want to, like, what is more important, getting the boon by winning and maybe making Durin even more angry at me, or just mending our friendship by kind of letting him win and giving up here, and also enduring the scorn of the dwarves, and they are cheering Durin, and of course the elf couldn't win. Kind of, it's funny. And after that, you also notice, like, there's so many details when Durin moves towards Elrond. He has this specific walk where you also feel like, okay, his body is also feels heavy for him currently due to all him smashing so many stones. It's, I don't know. I would not have expected that a scene that just hearing from it felt kind of stupid in a way. That's a stupid contest, whatever. It's not in the books or so, but how they managed to portray it and all the little details to it, I felt like it was a really good scene. Not sure how you think about that.
Yeah, no, I agree. Go on, Dan, actually, because I think you were gonna speak earlier also.
Okay. Yeah, I really liked that scene as well, where he stopped and kind of considered his options in the middle of the rite of, what was it, Sigyn Tarag or something.
Yeah, Sigyn Tarag.
Did you translate that, by the way?
It should mean Longbeards. So it's the rite of the Longbeards, basically.
Oh, okay. All right, makes sense. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Like he deliberately lost that contest because think about it. Like if he'd have won and he would have been granted a boon, it would be a very unheroic Tolkien type of thing to do, to basically dominate a culture by winning a contest like that. It makes it makes more sense for his diplomatic objectives for him to actually be able to form an alliance with somebody that he's been able to bury the hatchet, no pun intended, with, rather than, dominate him, because it would have been an act of domination for him to win that contest and for him to actually, force Durin's hand in that way. And also, if the boon was, I need an audience with your father, then it's gonna get him nowhere. So winning the contest would have, been losing.
Yeah, exactly. He gets an ally by that.
Yeah, and I really like the moment where they're in the lift. This is my other favorite moment from this whole sequence. They're in the elevator, the lift, and kind of there's a gap in the conversation, and Elrond, instead of begging his forgiveness immediately, the first thing he says is, "Congratulations on your wedding and your children."
Yeah.
I really like that line because it's very thoughtful for Elrond to make up for lost time first, rather than begging him in that way. And it shows an understanding of his culture, and it shows kind of strength, but in a real kind of diplomatic sense. It's strength of a different kind.
Yeah, exactly.
And really good characterization. And I also love the acting as well. It's nice to see an Elrond that isn't grim and dark all the time. I love Hugo Weaving, but for me, he wasn't the best portrayal of Elrond that we could have gotten in the movies, and it's already my favorite portrayal of Elrond. And I know there's going to be people that are going to hate that, but I'm sorry. I really like this version of Elrond, and it feels more like the warm, kind Elrond of the books than Hugo Weaving's version, for me. So yeah, loved all of this stuff, and looking forward to seeing more of Robert Aramayo.
Yeah, agreed. Carl, do you want to add something?
I think honestly Dan summed it up perfectly.
Yeah.
The only thing I'd add maybe is something I really like about the whole Elrond scenes. I'd have to just bring a small comparison to The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. So in the original trilogy, you had a lot of these like heartfelt moments, like when Sam and Frodo are in Osgiliath, or when Frodo initially leaves at Amon Hen. And there's like these bonding moments which feel very real and wholesome. They don't feel forced. And when you compare it to The Hobbit, there were some parts which they tried to kind of mimic it, but I felt it was forced, like kind of when Thorin is getting angry at Bilbo for like saving them from the wargs, and he's saying, we should have left you at home, and he says, I've never been so wrong. It's like they tried to mimic it, but I just didn't feel it. And so far, most of these Elrond scenes, they have these like really heartfelt moments which are moving. So like when they're actually talking about when Durin tells him that he missed out so many events in his lives, because like 20 years for a dwarf are a lot, but for an elf, they're nothing. It's like you feel it, you know what I mean? They feel real, very real, the emotion behind it is, it doesn't feel forced. I don't know, like they're really heartfelt, wholesome, like they're sweet moments for me that like make me smile, and I'd be really moved by them. And it's something I really love about this whole dynamic with Elrond, and that warmth is a really beautiful thing to see on screen.
Yeah, I think this also kind of, for me personally, yeah, it's maybe a bit harsh, but makes completely up for the Galadriel part, which I didn't like. That definitely yeah, I don't know, brings me to a better mood seeing these sections. So many details I like about it. Like also he says not Tarak, he says Tarak, and so he used these road R, which also, for example, Germany use instead of the trilled one. And it's mentioned in Appendix E that dwarves at some point started using this road R instead of the trilled one. Details like these really think, okay, that's awesome. Pronunciation throughout the series also pretty good, I have to admit. And yeah, these details I really enjoy as a result. The shots are great. Khazad-dûm looks great. In this shot here, we see the elevator. You see they are standing next to each other, but the size different works. And there's even some stone stuff in the background. So Durin can't stay further back than Elrond. So they really play a bit. And you ask yourself, did they film this separately or so? And then he puts his hand on his shoulder to break this, just from a filmmaking perspective. There's so many details in this. We could discuss this here for hours. I'm not sure if you, Dan or Carl, have something to add. I guess we all agree on this was pretty fantastic. So we can slowly wrap it up. I just took, it's always longer than expected, but when I invited you, you knew already, right?
No, true. Yeah, I agree with you, Chris. If you want, like, I think we've discussed plenty.
Yeah, we really discussed a lot, and I learned a lot. So, I would maybe come to the, I don't know, very short to wrap the show here up. Maybe I don't know. Have your expectations for episode 3 that comes out tomorrow? Right? Yeah, tomorrow. Can't believe that I have to get up relatively early already and to watch it. But yeah, any expectations, wishes, any thoughts on that? Very short, briefly, Carl and Dan.
I'm looking for the Numenor stuff to really make up for some of the bad setup with Galadriel, because we said right at the beginning when we were talking about Galadriel's storyline that you know they were kind of the plot felt manufactured and kind of contrived because they were trying to get her there. That was the objective. They had an A to get her from and a B to get her to, and what happened in the middle kind of didn't make the most sense in places. But now that she's there, I really want the payoff to be good. So I really want Numenor to really be good. And so my eye is going to be on Arthas in this episode, because that actor really needs to nail that role. It's going to be so important for that whole storyline throughout the 5 seasons to actually work, or probably 4-ish seasons, because I don't think we'll probably get any Ar-Pharazôn towards the end. Spoiler, he's not going to make it to the War of Last Alliance. But we can expect that role to be very, very important for the kind of the Fall of Numenor storyline, and he really has to embody that whole storyline because of the fact that they're compressing that storyline in a way that, you know, compresses multiple generations of rulers, and the gradual kind of decline and decadence of that society over time has to be embodied in this one man. So it's a big departure from the books, and it puts a lot of pressure on him to actually really kill it. You know. Also looking forward to Elendil, of course, because one of my regrets about the Peter Jackson movies is having an Elendil that was never named and was such a kind of cameo that was never really capitalized on in terms of the mythological Elrond from the Elendil from the books. It was absent from the movies, so I'm looking forward to seeing him as well. And so yeah, my main thoughts leading into the new episode is all of that stuff, really. I'm less interested in the Arondir stuff. We can imagine he's going to be in this kind of orc slave camp. I'm intrigued by Adar, even though I have nothing to go on about what to expect from him. So yeah, looking forward to it. And I'll be sharing my thoughts on Saturday evening on my channel. So if anybody's interested in a post-show breakdown. I'll be live on Saturday to talk about that. But yeah, I think that's all from me.
I agree with Dan that like Numenor is going to be a really cool part to explore further, hear more about, and even if we get like a bit more information on Halbrand, it would be interesting to see how, let's say, this mystery will unfold. Similarly, the whole Meteor Man, I'd love if we can get at least a bit more of a distinction of whether he's evil or good. In a way that they're like playing both sides. It's kind of cool, to build that hype, trying to find hints at what's going on. But yeah, that's like I'm really interested to follow. In terms of the other storylines, to be honest, Arondir is probably the one I'm less interested. Like I'd prefer the next episode to focus more on Numenor, maybe a bit more on the the dwarves, Celebrimbor and all of that. To be honest, and the big part of, let's say, the main part of Arondir's storyline, which interests me, rather than what's going on with him, it's the orc portrayal, because we didn't discuss it in the episode, Chris, and I think the orcs, they nailed them out of Lord of the Rings, the Hobbit and the series. The most, let's say, fear or apprehension towards the orcs was in this series. They really managed to give them like I wouldn't say a grotesque appearance, but you could feel they're like an evil creature. You know what I mean? They really managed to capture that sense of foreboding, and I loved it. Like hopefully it's not just in that episode, because there was that kind of a jump scare and all of that. Hopefully they managed to keep them, at these like the evil. I don't know, they managed to capture that sense in the rest of the series, because that was a high point. Like I was really intrigued. It was something like I always used to associate orcs with the Lord of the Rings one, and I feel the series might top it in that sense and the way I perceive them.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like that is definitely a thing I would like to see how I think we will even get introduced to like a kind of orc society maybe throughout the series. Hard to tell how this looks then exactly, but I'm also looking forward to these details. Like they really looked scary. Like it was not these just cannon fodder orcs. It was really like a dude. Okay, he was scary, I have to admit, and that was a lot of fun. It was also well shot, I felt. Even though, sure, if the orcs would have acted a bit smarter, they probably could have killed both, but then we had two main characters less. That was probably good that he didn't.
I'm curious how dark they'll take it. Like if we do actually see an orc city, how the depiction of, let's say, the enslavement of the humans, or some of the darker aspects or suggestions in Tolkien's work, how much of that would they include? How far are they ready to go? It's I'm really, really interested to see where they're heading with it and their plan for it.
Yeah, 100%.
Joe in the chat is hoping for orc restaurants and orc bakers.
Orc restaurants and orc bakers.
Yeah. Explain how they know about menus.
Mm-hmm.
That is true. That is the origin of the menu. But I would say we wrap it up now. If you don't have anything to add, because we are really a bit over time.
Nothing major. Just thank you for having us on, and I hope to do it again soon. And I hope to have you guys on my channel as well before the end of the season, if you're interested.
Yeah, that would be amazing. Yeah, it's fantastic even to meet Dan and having this call. It was really, really enjoyable, and honestly, you guys make me feel as if I have to pay now super attention to the series, because the amount of small details you notice is so impressive, man. Like when you were mentioning the whole
episodes came out, I streamed for 13 hours and went through basically every frame, so I have a kind of an advantage.
Because I was like, wow, I was honestly impressed by all of you, man.
I did also get to see them a few days early as well, and I talked to people afterwards as well, so I had a little bit more time. And I've watched them with a fine-tooth comb for sure.
That's like honestly impressed, man. But like you've made me see certain things in a different light, and it was a really, really awesome chat. Like, thanks for inviting me, Chris.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for coming. I was really worried that you were also too busy to make it, but you said you have time, we would be on board, and I said awesome. was really fun. And because it was so much fun, we will do it again, potentially next week. I'm not sure who will be here. I try to re-invite people, of course, as well. But also maybe you see me at Dan's channel, or I will be at Fellowship of Fans on Sunday, stuff like that. Tomorrow when the episode comes out, also my channel will be content about it. There will be a watch party and analysis stream. I think at first we analyze. I can't even talk anymore. We will look into the episode and then we have a watch party later or so together as well. So very curious about this. I'm also happy that it's only one episode this time, because making a video about 2 episodes is just a nightmare in a week.
Yes,
especially if you go into so much detail.
At least they are releasing them week by week. They're not dropping them all in one go, Netflix style. I do appreciate that. But
I also appreciate that.
But last week was a bit heavy. I'm still working on content for this week. I've got some editing to do this evening, so.
I was also editing until like 2 in the night. Today, I should say. It was horrifying experience. But
yeah, nice to meet you too, Carl. By the way, I said it earlier off air, but I'd definitely like to have you on the channel at some point.
Cheers. Likewise, man. Yeah, like at the moment, I was a bit tied down with my work in real life and some projects I've been working on. So my channel, in terms of content, I wasn't producing because I wasn't making time. But I'd like to have some live streams, not only on the series and not only on other works of Tolkien, discussing the Silmarillion and certain characters. And it would be amazing to have you on, Dan, and Chris, of course.
Thank you. It was really fun. Nice having you here also on my channel. And producing this content. So I don't know, we basically already talked about what is next on our channels, and people know who you are. Links were posted by Reflective Rambling in chat. Shoutouts to you. Thank you for helping here out and posting links and having an eye on chat, because I was too busy with production this time. Next time, when my timing will even better than this time, then we might also have a short Q&A round at the end or so. We'll probably have less to discuss next time, so maybe we have time for that, but who knows?
Yeah, sure. But, sounds good, man.
Yeah, so thank you, people, for watching this. Really appreciate that chat was active. Sorry for not interacting with chat that much, but as I said, it was really difficult today. The channels, as said, I will link them in the description later when the VOD is available. I might upload it to Spotify or something, maybe as like a special episode of my Games and Rings podcast thing, so you can also just listen to the audio and stuff like that. Yeah, definitely check out the stuff, Geekzone and Voice of Geekdom. I don't know, Geekzone, do you have any specific plans for a new video? You said you're still too busy currently.
Again, like I'm definitely planning to return to the channel in terms of proper lore videos. But hopefully, again, I think the thing about live streams are they do take a bit of work to set up. But sometimes there's the idea of those 2 hours. It can be a bit foreboding, until you get it done. But I'd like to have at least like weekly episodes interacting with the community and getting things going. So that's like, let's say, a short-term plan. But hopefully in like a month, in like a couple of months, I'll be back to making proper lore videos.
Awesome. You heard it here first, basically. But yeah, again, thank you to you too. It was so much fun talking to you. It was really a nice conversation we had here. We couldn't cover everything. We could have gone for an hour or two, I feel, but...
Yeah. I think we could break the record for your longest video, Chris.
You don't want to. It's like...
I think... Okay. We'd be close, maybe. I think we could push it, though. We'd be close.
We could. So yeah, I just fire up the credits, which I did not re-render, so it's the old credits, but shoutouts to all the people supporting here this channel and so on, with memberships, subscribe, likes, follows on Twitter and whatnot. If you haven't done this yet, feel free to do so in chat, and as said, also check out the others. They will also appreciate subscribe or whatever on their channels. They do fantastic lore videos. Also, yeah, the Geekzone, like one of the, I would always call him one of the OGs of Tolkien lore content on YouTube with Men of the West and so on. So definitely some fantastic videos on there. Really can recommend his Tom Bombadil video, one of my favorites of Geekzone. And yeah, also Dan makes also more content at times, also fantastic podcasts with interesting guests. I remember that one with Carl Hostetter was pretty nice interview. So there's definitely good content there on these channels. As said, if you want to have more, if you like the stream and want more streams with me in it at least, then tomorrow will be the place. This channel will be the place to be, because I will of course stream tomorrow quite a bit, and we discuss episode 3. So again, people, thank you for watching, and see you people next time. Goodbye.